Chapter 96. The final results of the freshman martial meet had not been announced yet, which meant that the newcomer king had not been born yet. Everyone could tell that Nye Tian's strength was far from what Lan Binji could compare to. But before the results were announced, no one dared to be sure who the newcomer king would be. At this time, everyone's eyes turned to the finals referee, Ai Anmin. Ai Anmin saw Qi Feng's solemn expression and could not help but break out in a cold sweat. He first glanced at Qin Yetian, then turned his gaze to Fan Jinwu, not knowing how to announce the results. Lan Binji was the predetermined newcomer king, but Nye Tian's strength was clearly above Lan Binji's. If not for Qin Yetian, Lan Binji would have been a corpse long ago. Ai Anmin was at a loss and did not know how to announce the result. Qi Feng was clearly on Nye Tian's side, and Fan Jinwu had already informed him that the newcomer king could only be Lan Binji and no one else. At this time, Fan Jinwu finally stood up and walked over slowly. He swept his gaze around, then nodded slightly at Qi Feng and said with a playful smile, "Dean Qi, I didn't expect you to appear too. You really surprised me." Qi Feng sneered and replied, "Fan Jinwu, you are also a member of Tyrant Cloud. As the person in charge of this recruitment, someone openly broke Tyrant Cloud's rules, but you chose to stand by and watch. What is the meaning of this?" Fan Jinwu frowned slightly and replied coldly, "I don't need you to teach me what to do. I am the person in charge of this recruitment, but you made a move at the freshman martial meet. What is the meaning of this? Do you think I am not qualified to be the person in charge?" The corners of Qi Feng's mouth curled up as if he had heard a joke. He said, "I am the vice dean of Tyrant Cloud. Someone broke Tyrant Cloud's rules, and I made a move to stop it. Is there anything wrong with that? On the other hand, you have been watching coldly from the sidelines. You have ulterior motives." Ulterior motives? Qi Feng's words were very clear. He was saying that Fan Jinwu was trying to borrow Qin Yetian's hand to kill Nye Tian. Ulterior motives? Fan Jinwu deliberately put on a shocked expression and said coldly, "Qi Feng, you better speak clearly. I, Fan Jinwu, am upright and cannot tolerate sand in my eyes. If someone maliciously slandered me, I would never let it go." "What a good way to sit upright!" Qi Feng shouted angrily, his face revealing unconcealable anger. He felt disgusted hearing such words from Fan Jinwu's mouth. "Fan Jinwu, since you want me to say it, I'll do as you wish." Qi Feng took a step forward and said sternly, "Qin Yetian interfering in the freshman martial meet is a provocation to Tyrant Cloud Academy. As the person in charge of this recruitment, you have not made a move and have been watching coldly from the sidelines. You simply want to borrow Qin Yetian's hand to kill Nye Tian. Do you think I don't know what you are thinking? In front of me, you'd better put away your hypocritical face." Fan Jinwu wanted to use Qin Yetian to kill Nye Tian. As soon as Qi Feng's words fell, the entire place was deathly silent. A pin drop could be heard. Everyone looked at Fan Jinwu with a strange look in their eyes, and the atmosphere suddenly became strange. As the person in charge of this recruitment, Fan Jinwu had been standing by the side and watching Lan Binji and Qin Yetian's provocations. Thinking about it carefully, it was indeed suspicious. Fan Jinwu stood on the spot, his fists clenched. He did not expect that Qi Feng would really say it. What a joke! After some time, Fan Jinwu roared angrily and said loudly, "I'm a complete stranger to Nye Tian. Why do I want to kill him?" Qi Feng glanced at Qiushan not far away and suddenly became calm all of a sudden. He said loudly, "Because Nye Tian is a genius. Because you can't tolerate geniuses. Back then, Big Brother Qiushan was framed by you. Do you think I don't know?" Qiushan. Qi Feng finally still said this name. Qiushan stood at a place not far away from Fan Jinwu and was actually very calm at this moment. He just looked at Fan Jinwu indifferently. 25 years ago, it was precisely Fan Jinwu who destroyed his essence meridians. This enmity, this hatred, Qiushan would forever remember it. He wanted to take revenge. He wanted to take revenge immediately, but he did not, because he knew that now was not the time for revenge yet. Fan Jinwu's strength was very formidable, and his identity was even more special. The present Qiushan did not have the capital to take revenge at all. Qi Feng, you're bullshitting. Fan Jinwu's expression suddenly changed, blue veins bulging on his face. A terrifying aura burst out from his entire body. His voice was trembling, and his entire body was also trembling. Without a doubt, this was the trembling of rage. Oh no, Dean Fan is angry. They won't fight, right? I reckon that they're really going to fight. I've long heard that Dean Qi and Dean Fan are at odds. I didn't expect that they're actually like fire and water. The two of them are both giant spirit realm powerhouses. Their primordial spirits have condensed giant spirit true bodies. If they fight, there will be a good show to watch. The crowd below discussed softly. Facing Fan Jinwu's rage, Qi Feng had a calm look. His entire body shook, similarly releasing a tyrannical aura, and he said fiercely, Fan Jinwu, if you want to fight, let's fight. Why would I be afraid of you? Both sides faced each other, not giving an inch. The atmosphere at the scene immediately became tense to the extreme. When Qin Yetian saw the scene in front of him, he was overjoyed in his heart. Qi Feng and Fan Jinwu are going to fight to the death. There will be a good show to watch now. Qin Yetian snuck a glance at Nye Tian and reminded Lan Binji, intentionally or otherwise. His meaning was very clear. If Qi Feng and Fan Jinwu fought, Lan Binji could totally kill Nye Tian. Qin Yetian really didn't want to personally take action. In any case, Nye Tian was extremely weak right now. Lan Binji was more than enough to take action. Qi Feng, you slandered me in public. If I continue to tolerate you, how can I still be Vice Dean Tyrant Cloud? Fan Jinwu's eyes were bloodshot, and his entire body released a sharp killing intent. A vicious voice rumbled out from his throat. As his voice fell, Fan Jinwu's body shook, and a giant blood-red tree that was 40 to 50 meters tall appeared behind him. The flamboyant tree trunk danced in the air like blood-colored tentacles, emitting a bloody and violent aura. The giant blood-red tree was Fan Jinwu's primordial spirit, the Scarlet Blood Dragon Sandalwood. When the Scarlet Blood Dragon Sandalwood appeared, the surrounding air instantly tightened as though it was being pulled by an invisible force, about to split apart at any moment. Immediately, a terrifying bloody aura spread out. Everyone felt their hearts tremble inexplicably at the same time, as though they were about to kneel and worship in the next moment. What a terrifying aura! He's actually stronger than Qin Yetian. Taking a few steps back, Nye Tian's heart sank. He didn't expect Fan Jinwu's strength to be above Qin Yetian's. Everyone, retreat! Qi Feng roared. In the next moment, everyone retreated, retreating hundreds of meters away from Fan Jinwu and Qi Feng. Fan Jinwu, I'll take revenge for Big Brother Qiushan today. Qi Feng smiled coldly. His white clothes fluttered and his body shook. Immediately, terrifying essence energy surged out of his body, condensing into a giant sword behind him. It was 30 meters long and had a terrifying aura. Sword spirit. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The giant sword was called Black Frost Moon Slash, and it was Qi Feng's primordial spirit. The giant spirit true body formed by the Black Frost Moon Slash looked even more terrifying and shocking, as though it could cut through the sky. This was the third time everyone saw the giant spirit true body today. Qin Yetian's giant spirit true body was the Rushing Thunder Beast, which was a beast spirit. Fan Jinwu's giant spirit true body was the Scarlet Blood Dragon Sandalwood, which was a wood spirit. Qi Feng's giant spirit true body was the Black Frost Moon Slash, which was a weapon spirit. Chapter 97. Everyone looked at Qi Feng and Fan Jinwu from afar. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly, afraid of missing any exciting moments. Most people would never have the chance to see a battle between giant spirit martial artists in their lifetime. Qiushan looked at Qi Feng with a nervous expression, clearly very worried. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, Qi Feng and Fan Jinwu both have second-level giant spirit strength, but Qi Feng's is a fifth-level giant spirit while Fan Jinwu's is only a fourth-level giant spirit. Furthermore, Qi Feng is a sword spirit while Fan Jinwu is a wood spirit, so it's impossible for Fan Jinwu to be Qi Feng's mat. Nie Tian was right. Although Fan Jinwu had the same strength as Qi Feng, his true combat strength was slightly inferior. A sword spirit's advantage was flexibility and powerful attack power, while a wood spirit focused on control and defense. Only by cooperating with other primordial spirits could it unleash the greatest power. In a one-on-one battle, it would be difficult to unleash the power of a wood spirit. Fan Jinwu wasn't stupid. He naturally understood his own shortcomings, so he chose to make the first move, wanting to seize the initiative. Scarlet Blood Lone Dragon Drill. Fan Jinwu roared. His figure was wild as he blasted out with his palm. Countless branches of the Scarlet Blood Dragon sandalwood twisted together, condensing into a huge drill that blasted out. Boom! There was a loud explosion in the air as the bluestone slabs on the ground were swept up. Before they even touched the Scarlet Blood Dragon sandalwood, they had already turned into powder. Everywhere the Scarlet Blood Lone Dragon drill went, a terrifying deep pit appeared in the ground. The sharp wind, violent aura, and bloody aura arrived in the blink of an eye. Fan Jinwu was determined to succeed in this attack. Everyone present felt a chill run down their spines. Everyone felt an incomparably tyrannical aura surging with a threat that made them feel despair. When Qin Yetian saw this scene, his heart couldn't help but tremble. He didn't expect Fan Jinwu's strength to be so terrifying. It was definitely above his. Still water beheading moon. In the face of Fan Jinwu's powerful attack, Qi Feng's expression was calm. Instead of retreating, he advanced. The profound frost crescent cleaving sword tumbled through the air like a huge flood dragon, carrying a monstrous aura as it slashed down. Immediately, the surrounding 100 meters of space stagnated, and the entire space seemed to have come to a standstill. No one had expected that the first exchange between the two would be a clash of ultimate move. Giant spirit martial artist, giant spirit true body, just this kind of earth-devouring aura was unbearable. Bang! The next moment, the Scarlet Blood Soul Dragon drill collided with the Stillwater/Moon Beheader, like two ancient beasts colliding together. There was an earth-shattering noise, and there was immediately a visible and terrifying wave of energy in the air, surging out from the center of the collision. Boom! Whoosh! Suddenly, dust flew up from the ground and gravel rolled. The ground under his feet was torn apart, and a terrifying scar that was several meters deep appeared. Qi Feng and Fan Jinwu retreated at the same time. They retreated dozens of meters before stabilizing themselves. Pooh! Pooh! Almost at the same time, the two of them vomited blood. This move was too ferocious. It was a clash of elemental energy against elemental energy, an absolute confrontation of strength against strength. Both sides were equally matched. The two of them stood still at the same time and looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with extreme anger. Having come this far, the two sides were already irreconcilable. Boom! Boom! The two of them revolved their essence meridians again, the aura of their bodies surging. This time, the Scarlet Blood Dragon Sandalwood and the Profound Frost Beheader became even more berserk, and the aura was even more astonishing. The onlookers could not help retreating one after another, discussing in low voices. Are Principal Qi and Principal Fan going to fight to the death? Looking at the aura, they really want to fight to the death. I wonder who will win. F***ck me. No way. They are our principals. Is there such a big grudge? Everyone sucked in a cold breath, looking at Qi Feng and Fan Jinwu in shock. Nie Tian also frowned slightly when he saw it. Things developing to this step was also what he did not expect. If Qi Feng and Fan Jinwu had a life-and-death battle, Qi Feng's chances of winning were more than 70%, so Nie Tian was really not too worried. Qi Feng, I didn't expect that we would come to this step. Fan Jinwu's face was ferocious as he roared. Qi Feng's expression was cold as he said in a cold voice, Fan Jinwu, prepare to pay the price for framing Big Brother Qiushan back then. The moment his voice fell, the two's aura skyrocketed again. The surrounding space was filled with a bloody and violent aura. Qiushan reaped what he sowed back then. And you, Qi Feng, deserve to die. Fan Jinwu roared again and again, his eyes bloodshot. The monstrous anger turned into endless killing intent, and the aura all over his body was cold and bloody. The crimson blood dragon Sandalwood shook violently like a demon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, about to tear everything apart in the next moment. Crimson blood dragon Sandalwood, death strike. A sharp roar sounded cold and sharp. This time, Fan Jinwu did not care about anything. The next moment, the crimson blood dragon Sandalwood released a scarlet lightning bolt that tore through the air, carrying a death roar as it attacked Qi Feng. Profound Frost Moon Slash, Extreme Waterfall. Qi Feng also used his ultimate move. The Profound Frost Moon Slash's sword edge shone brightly, and a sharp sword intent enveloped the void for 100 meters. A terrifying sword shadow shot out and blasted at Fan Jinwu. Crimson Blood Dragon Sandalwood, Death Strike. Profound Frost Moon Slash, Extreme Waterfall. Both of them used killing moves. After this move, it would determine who was superior and who lived and died. The Scarlet Lightning and the terrifying sword Shadow shot out at top speed and were about to collide. However, at this critical moment, a sudden change occurred. Stop! An indifferent and cold voice sounded. Then, a bone-chilling aura suddenly appeared and turned into a vortex in the air. It was like the spring wind and rain, nourishing everything silently. The Scarlet Lightning and the terrifying sword Shadow bombarded the vortex, but they were like clay oxen entering the sea, disappearing without a trace. At the same time, a graceful figure appeared in the air. Everyone looked at the figure that suddenly appeared in the air, and they were collectively petrified. What kind of figure was this? Her white clothes were spotless, and her beautiful black hair hung down to her waist. Moreover, a purple ribbon was tied around her slender waist, and it vividly displayed her extremely perfect figure. Her exquisite facial features had an extremely complicated beauty that fused purity and charm. Her ice-blue eyes were like the deep sea, releasing an extremely mysterious beauty. At this moment, space and time completely stopped. Everything around them seemed to no longer exist. Countless eyes stared at the figure in the air, unwilling to look away for even half a second. The woman in the air was soul-stirring and breathtaking. She was so beautiful that she shouldn't exist. Even Nie Tian couldn't help but be stunned. For a moment, his eyes happened to meet the woman's gaze. In an instant, Nie Tian felt as if his entire body had been electrocuted, and he almost lost his mind. However, the next moment, he discovered that there was an extremely deep and cold coldness in the other party's ice-blue eyes, causing people's hearts to tremble and immediately keep a respectful distance. Cold. The woman's eyes were extremely cold, so cold that it made people shudder. Emo Rushi's coldness was a little girl's disguise, but the woman in front of him was absolutely indifferent, as if nothing was important in her eyes. Dean. After a while, Qi Feng and Fan Jinwu exclaimed at the same time, looking at the woman in the air in disbelief. Chapter 98. After a long time, everyone heard Qi Feng and Fan Jinwu's voices and barely reacted. However, no one made a sound, and no one commented because any comment would be a blasphemy to Rui Qianyu's beauty. Rui Qianyu's figure landed lightly. She glanced at Qi Feng and Fan Jinwu and said, "This matter ends here." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was filled with extreme coldness and determination that no one could defy. Qi Feng and Fan Jinwu didn't dare to speak, much less refute. Rui Qianyu wasn't just beautiful. Her strength was even more terrifying. She was the only true element realm cultivator in the Blue Cloud Empire. Without the strength of a true element realm cultivator, Rui Qianyu wouldn't have been able to resolve the life and death battle between Qi Feng and Fan Jinwu so easily. Rui Qianyu's beautiful ice-blue eyes swept across the audience. Wherever her gaze landed, everyone lowered their heads in shame. Only one person stared straight at Rui Qianyu without any avoidance. He was Nie Tian. Nie Tian looked at Rui Qianyu with a rather complicated expression. He could see a huge secret on Rui Qianyu. Rui Qianyu's gaze swept across everyone and finally landed on Nie Tian. She said indifferently, "Your name is Nie Tian?" "Yes." Nie Tian nodded. Not only was he not nervous, but he even smiled slightly. Rui Qianyu's beautiful eyes flickered as she said, "You're this year's Rookie King. Come with me." His indifferent words stunned everyone in the audience. After Rui Qianyu said that, there was no need to announce the Rookie King. It was definitely Nie Tian. Even the Blue Cloud Emperor didn't dare to refute Rui Qianyu's words. Qin Yetian froze and couldn't say a word for a long time. He didn't dare to speak either. In front of Rui Qianyu, he did not even have the courage to speak. Without any delay, Rui Qianyu turned and left. Nie Tian bid farewell to Jean Debao and the rest, and left with Rui Qianyu. Everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at the two figures in disbelief. Until the two figures completely disappeared, everyone still had a dumbfounded expression. "BB boss," he left with Dean Royu. After a long time, Jean Debao finally reacted. He rubbed his fat face hard to make sure that he wasn't dreaming. Nie Yuro held Bab in her arms and raised her eyebrows. She murmured, "That big sister was so beautiful just now." On the other side, Qin Yetian had a bitter expression on his face. He even had the heart to cry. Nie Tian becoming the newcomer king also meant that their Qin family had to compensate the Jin family with a set of Tier 4 battle armor. Tier 4 battle armor was the clan's cornerstone treasure bestowed to the Qin family by the late emperor. Even Qin Yetian hadn't worn it yet. Lan Binji looked in the direction where Nie Tian disappeared with a venomous look. His pair of eyes were almost spitting fire. Hidden in the crowd, Lan Bingchen's heart was in turmoil. Faintly, he felt that he seemed to have made a wrong decision. He originally had the chance to save Nie Tian, but he didn't. This choice was destined to become the biggest regret in his life. After a while, Nie Tian followed Rui Qianyu to a dense forest in Tyrant Cloud Academy. Nie Tian saw an extremely simple and crude grass hut in the dense forest from afar. He suddenly realized that this grass hut was where Rui Qianyu lived. The dignified headmaster of Tyrant Cloud actually lives in such a simple and crude place. Interesting. Nie Tian shot a glance at Rui Qianyu and smiled playfully. Looking at Rui Qianyu at such a close distance, he could feel her soul-stirring beauty even more. It simply made people not dare to look straight at her. Rui Qianyu looked at Nie Tian very seriously. Her icy blue eyes seemed to be somewhat puzzled. She wanted to see through the youth before her, but how could she possibly see through him? "Your strength is at the 4th level origin spirit realm?" Rui Qianyu spoke very coldly, bringing along a sense of indifference as well as a sense of desolation that could not be shaken off. Nie Tian looked at Rui Qianyu's eyes, his heart trembling slightly. Logic told him that this girl before him was definitely someone with a story. Nie Tian nodded, not denying it. Rui Qianyu's brows were tightly knitted, a hint of puzzlement finally appearing in her eyes as she said, "You actually dare to exchange blows with Qin Yetian with the strength of the 4th level origin spirit realm. Who exactly are you?" Nie Tian was not nervous. He only smiled faintly and replied, "Everyone has their own secrets. I won't tell you mine, just like you won't tell me yours." Rui Qianyu's icy blue eyes narrowed slightly. She had not thought that Nie Tian could actually maintain such composure in front of her. In the Blue Cloud Empire, everyone would have a look of reverence when they saw her. Only Nie Tian was an exception. What you said is very right. I shouldn't pry into your secrets. After a while, Rui Qinyu said seriously, Nie Tian, you're the newcomer king of Tyrant Cloud. According to Tyrant Cloud's rules, you can follow me to cultivate for 10 days. But your strength is too weak. I'll be going to an extremely dangerous place next. I'll give you a month's time. Within a month, if you can't advance to the manifestation realm, you'll lose the chance to cultivate with me. When Rui Qinyu finished speaking, she looked at Nie Tian with an indifferent expression. Her saying this was actually stripping away Nie Tian's chance to cultivate with her. Because no one could advance from the 4th level origin spirit realm to the manifestation realm within a month. Even a peerless monstrous martial arts genius could not possibly do it either. Nie Tian frowned slightly but did not have any extreme reaction. Advancing from the 4th level origin spirit realm to the manifestation realm in a month's time. Even the previous life's Nie Tian was unable to do it. But in this life, he could do it, and he could do it very easily. Nie Tian's primordial spirit was the primal chaos original coffin. The greatest advantage of the primal chaos original coffin was that it could slow down the flow of time. Inside the primal chaos original coffin, Nie Tian possessed 10 times more time than others. A month's time, to Nie Tian, was practically equivalent to a year's time. Advancing from the 4th level origin spirit realm to the manifestation realm in a year's time was very casual. All right, no problem. Nie Tian smiled faintly and agreed very casually. He did not care about the chance to cultivate with Rui Qinyu. What he cared about was Rui Qinyu herself. You agree? Rui Qinyu stilled slightly, her towering breasts rising and falling intensely. She thought that she had heard wrongly. I agree. Nie Tian smiled relaxedly. Rui Qinyu reacted and nodded, saying, Leave then. I will always be here. If you advance to the manifestation realm, you can come find me at any time. But remember, you only have a month's time. All right. This student will take his leave. Nie Tian bowed slightly, turned around and left. This was the first time he called himself a student in front of another person. Nie Tian found it funny in his heart. It was a very strange and comical feeling. Nie Tian, who are you? What secrets do you have? Rui Qinyu watched as the youth's figure gradually disappeared into the distance, her beautiful eyes flashing with a strange light. This was the first time she was interested in another person. This feeling was both foreign and real to her. Chapter 99. Walking out of the dense forest, Nie Tian turned his head to look in the direction where Rui Qinyu was. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he murmured, Rui Qinyu, if I'm not wrong, your eyes are one of the legendary 10 great Khanate eyes, the rainbow pupils. The first time Nie Tian saw Rui Qinyu, he noticed that her eyes were different from the others. They were suffused with a deep blue color. Nie Tian could basically confirm that Rui Qinyu's eyes were one of the 10 great Khanate eyes, the rainbow pupils. The reason why her eyes were deep blue was because she had opened the blue pupils. The rainbow pupils were the same as Tang 13's ghost eyes. They were both innate divine abilities, but the rainbow pupils were much more terrifying than the ghost eyes. Back then, Tang Hao was taken in as a disciple by Nie Tian because he had the ghost eyes. The rainbow pupils was one of the 10 great Khanate eyes. If it could be completely developed, its power would be immeasurable. Among the Heaven Realm's 9 emperors, the Purple Tenuity Emperor, who was ranked 3rd, had the purple demon eyes. But the rainbow pupils were even more terrifying than the purple demon eyes. If Rui Qinyu could grow to the Celestial Emperor realm, she would definitely be a figure comparable to the Heaven Realm's 9 emperors. Rainbow pupils. I didn't expect to encounter it. What a surprise. Nie Tian smiled slightly in his heart and murmured, Looks like I have to pay more attention to Rui Qinyu in the future. Returning to Tyrant Cloud Academy, Nie Tian saw Qi Feng and the others waiting for him from afar. Qi Feng was worried that someone would harm Nie Tian, so he waited here in advance for Nie Tian. Boss, you're back. What did Dean Royu say to you? Jean de Bao ran over with a face full of excitement. Nie Tian did not hide it and repeated Rui Qinyu's words. Advancing from the 4th level essence spirit realm to the manifestation realm in a month. Isn't Dean Roy you messing with people here? Jean de Bao had an astonished look on his face, almost wanting to scold her. Dean Rui's actions are a little unreasonable. Qi Feng also nodded slightly. He felt that Rui Qianyu was playing tricks on people. Nie Tian didn't say anything. He smiled faintly and said, "Let's go back first. I'm very weak right now and I need to rest." Indeed, Nie Tian had just gone through a huge battle, and the crucial thing was that he had consumed a Tier 3 Yuan Burst pill. Now, the side effects of the Yuan Burst pill were showing, and his body was extremely weak. The crowd didn't stay any longer and left together. After returning to the Jin mansion, Nie Tian immediately entered his room. He was too weak and needed to recover. Martial artists could go for a long time without eating. Just by absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, martial artists could maintain the normal operation of their bodies. Nie Tian told everyone not to disturb him and went into his room. The side effects of the Tier 3 Yuan Burst pill were very strong. It was enough to make a martial artist very weak for the next month. However, it would only take Nie Tian 2 or 3 days to overcome the effects of the essence detonation pill. That was because his body was far stronger than ordinary people's, and he had the primal chaos original coffin, which gave him 10 times the time of others. At the same time, when Nie Tian and the rest returned to the Jin mansion, Lan Binji also returned to the Binji Duke mansion. Bang! Lan Binji's eyes were ferocious. He smashed a 9-colored vase into pieces with one palm. The shattered pieces scattered on the ground were like his heart, shattered beyond repair. Damn it! Damn it! He deserves to be killed. Lan Binji roared furiously like a deranged beast, about to go berserk at any time. Qin Yetian and Qin Yuhu watched from the side with fear and didn't dare to go forward to persuade him. Nie Tian, I must kill you! I must kill you! Lan Binji couldn't contain the killing intent in his body. An extremely venomous voice rolled out from his throat. Your Highness, please calm down. Qin Yetian finally took a step forward and spoke carefully. Slap! Lan Binji suddenly turned around and casually waved his hand. An air force slapped Qin Yetian's face, causing half of the latter's face to swell up. Qin Yetian touched half of his flushed face and looked at Lan Binji with a surprised expression. Qin Yetian didn't think that Lan Binji would dare to make a move. He was the commander of the Imperial Guards. Even the Emperor hadn't slapped him in the face before. And he was Lan Binji's biological uncle. Lan Binji actually slapped Qin Yetian in the face. He was practically a mad dog. Slap. At this time, another crisp slap rang out. But this time, the slap landed on Lan Binji's face. Qin Yetian and Qin Yuhu looked at each other and instantly felt a chill down their spines. Who dared to slap Lan Binji? He was a prince. In the next moment, a ghost-like black-robed figure appeared in the hall. This person was completely hidden in the black robe, and his entire body emitted a cold aura that made people feel suffocated. Even Qin Yetian, a giant spirit realm expert, felt quite a bit of pressure when facing this black-robed person. Why were you that person? Qin Yuhu's teeth were already chattering. He recognized that the black-robed person was Tang Yuyu, whom he had seen before. That's right, this person was the #1 assassin of the Bloodbat sect, Tang Yuyu. Scram! Tang Yuyu said in a low voice, simple and direct. Qin Yuhu subconsciously retreated, and almost fell. Tang Yuyu turned to look at Qin Yetian and said coldly, You scram too. His voice wasn't loud, but it contained a suffocating pressure. Qin Yetian felt his entire body being enveloped by a chill, and fine beads of sweat seeped out of his forehead. Tang Yuyu only had the strength of the 9th level of the Wanxiang realm, while Qin Yetian was already a giant spirit realm martial artist. But Tang Yuyu's battle strength was clearly above Qin Yetian's. Qin Yetian hesitated for a moment, but ultimately still left the hall. Only Lan Binji and Tang Yuyu were left in the hall. Tang Yuyu, you failed. Lan Binji covered half of her face and said through gritted teeth, her eyes full of resentment. Tang Yuyu, Qin Yetian, these two people were originally there to ensure that Lan Binji obtained the best newcomer king. Unexpectedly, the two of them both failed. Especially Tang Yuyu. Ever since she became a professional assassin, she had never failed. Even when facing opponents stronger than her, she could deal with them calmly. Never would she have thought that she would actually fall at the hands of a fourth-level essence spirit martial artist. Unforgivable, simply unforgivable. This failure this time, Tang Yuyu was even more pained than Lan Binji. This is the first time I've failed, and it will also be the last time. After a while, Tang Yuyu opened her mouth coldly and said, "Give me some time. I'll definitely kill Nietian." No. Suddenly, Lan Binji roared at the top of her lungs, "Not only do I want Nietian to die, I want everyone around him to die. His younger sister, his brothers, his friends, his family, I want all of them to die." In the end, Lan Binji was like a beast that had completely lost all reason. Enough. Tang Yuyu did not wish to listen on anymore and said coldly in a deep voice, "I'm only going to kill Nietian. The others have nothing to do with me." Finished talking, Tang Yuyu's figure moved, instantly vanishing like a specter. Chapter 100. After Tang Yuyu left Binji's palace, she walked to a quiet place. Lifting up her black robe, she revealed a face of unparalleled beauty. "Lan Binji, you really are a mad dog. Father was right. The Lan clan's rule in the Kingdom of Blue Clouds has come to an end." Tang Yuyu's lips curled up perfectly, accentuating her perfect facial features. The father Tang Yuyu was talking about was the leader of the Bloodbat House. Just then, a silver pendant in front of Tang Yuyu's chest suddenly flashed. She turned around and saw a young man's silhouette dashing by. Tang Yuyu didn't pay much attention to it. Instead, she focused all her attention on the silver pendant. This pendant has never lit up before. Why did it suddenly flash? The silver pendant was something Tang Yuyu carried everywhere she went. It had never shown any abnormalities. Why did it flash today? It was very strange. If it was anyone else, they would have thought it was an illusion. But Tang Yuyu was a top assassin, and assassins never believed in illusions. After a long time, Tang Yuyu didn't find anything out of the ordinary. She covered the silver pendant again. Her eyes flashed and she mumbled, "Tang 13, who are you? What does it have to do with me?" Every time she saw the silver pendant, Tang Yuyu would think of a name. Tang 13. Every time she thought of this name, she would feel a surge of warmth in her heart. It was a very strange feeling. To an assassin, it felt unreal. But she couldn't remember who Tang 13 was. She couldn't remember what Tang 13 looked like. There was only a blurry face that flashed across her mind. At the same time, a running shadow suddenly stopped a few hundred meters away from Tang Yuyu. This shadow was the young man Tang Yuyu saw. This young man was none other than Tang 13. Tang 13 stopped where she was and mumbled, "Why did I have a strange feeling? I felt like I missed something." Tang 13 suddenly turned around and ran a few steps back. She looked at the quiet alleyway she just passed but saw nothing. Tang Yuyu had already left. Was it an illusion? Tang 13 mumbled to herself as she picked up the silver pendant in front of her chest. Her silver pendant and Tang Yuyu's pendant were exactly the same. This kind of pendant was very common, and it was called the heart pendant. It was originally a pair, and the two pendants could sense each other. Tang 13 shook her head, sighed, and continued to run. He wasn't looking for anyone else but Nietian. The commotion Nietian made in the Imperial City was too big. Even Tang 13, a newbie assassin who just joined the Blood Bat Gate, knew about it. After a while, Tang 13's silhouette appeared in front of the Jin Palace. However, Tang 13 didn't plan on entering from the front door. She quickly circled around to the outer walls of the Jin Manor. Then, like a ghost, she jumped into the Jean manor and disappeared. At the same time, another familiar figure appeared at the entrance of the Jean residence. It was the Crown Prince, Lan Bingchen. The people of the Jean mansion recognized that it was the Crown Prince and bowed to let him pass. When Lan Bingchen walked into the Jean residence's main hall, Jean Mingxin and the others were already waiting for her. In the lobby. "Your Highness, are you here for my boss?" Jean de Bao looked at Lan Bingchen. There was no longer the respect he had before. Instead, his face was full of mockery. Jean de Bao already knew that Lan Bingchen was also there. If Lan Bingchen showed up to stop him, then Nie Tian wouldn't have to fight with Qin Yetian. Sadly, Lan Bingchen made the wrong choice. Lan Bingchen was a little embarrassed. He didn't think that Nie Tian's capability was so strange that he could actually survive Qin Yetian's attack. However, Lan Bingchen wasn't angry. Instead, he smiled and said, "Mr. Jean, I have something important to discuss with Mr. Nie Tian." Something important? Jean de Bao's expression didn't change for the better. He laughed weirdly. "Boss helped you defeat Prince Bingyi. Is there anything more important than that?" Lan Bingchen's expression turned even uglier. He was speechless. De Bao. Jean Mingxin quickly stopped Jean de Bao from continuing. There were some things that everyone should know. If they were to say it out loud, then it would be tearing apart the last layer of face. Jean Mingxin's reaction was very calm. He still maintained his respect and said, "Your Highness, if you want to find Mr. Nie, I'm afraid you've made a wasted trip. Mr. Nie's body is weak. He's heavily injured and needs to rest. I've specially instructed that no one is allowed to disturb him." No one was allowed to disturb him. This was indeed what Nie Tian said. However, when it came out of Jean Mingxin's mouth, it sounded like an excuse. Lan Bingchen frowned. However, he nodded sincerely and said, "Since it's like that, I will take my leave. Mr. Jean, please help me tell Mr. Nie that I came. In the future, I will come once a day until Mr. Nie is willing to see me." "As you wish," Jean de Bao said coldly. "Even if you come 10 times a day, boss won't see you." Jean Mingxin looked at Jean de Bao and shook his head. "This son of mine is still too young and too impulsive. Goodbye." Lan Bingchen sighed softly and turned around to leave. His silhouette was very sad. After Lan Bingyi left, Jean Mingxin and Jean de Bao exchanged glances and looked at a dark corner at the same time. Jean Mingxin faintly smiled and said, "Friend in the dark, why are you trespassing the Jean residence?" Just as he finished speaking, a shadow walked out from the dark corner. It was Tang 13. Tang 13 awkwardly smiled and said, "I am Nie Tian's friend. Since he is resting, I won't disturb him." After speaking, Tang 13's body moved and he was about to leave. However, how could Jean Mingxin let him go? Jean Mingxin's spiritual energy surged out. A giant gold coin that was 5 to 6 meters in diameter flew out and trapped Tang 13. The gold coin tightened and trapped Tang 13. Jean Mingxin faintly smiled and said, "Since you're here, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Whether or not you are Mr. Nie's friend, we'll know after we meet him." Luckily, Tang 13 said he was Nie Tian's friend. Otherwise, Jean Mingxin wouldn't have trapped him, he would have killed him. No matter what, Jean Mingxin was the president of the Blue Cloud Commerce, and he was at the first level of the giant spirit. The giant gold coin just now was his spirit, the money of the universe. All right. Tang 13 looked helplessly at the Jean father and son. He couldn't understand how Jean Mingxin discovered him when his presence was hidden to the extreme. Actually, the one who discovered Tang 13 wasn't Jean Mingxin, but Jean de Bao. Tang 13 had the ghost eye and his presence was hidden to the extreme. Even Jean Mingxin didn't discover his presence. However, Jean de Bao was different. His origin spirit allowed him to discover anyone lurking in the dark. Because Jean de Bao's spirit wasn't ordinary. It wasn't one of the 3 spirits, but a book. That's right, a book. and this book had a very domineering name, The Demon and God's Blood Scroll. Jean de Bayeux awakened his spirit at the age of 10 and thought he would be a monster of the martial path. But what made people speechless was that after Jean de Bayeux awakened his spirit, his strength didn't improve at all. He stayed at the first level of the origin spirit for 5 whole years. Chapter 101. After awakening the celestial demon blood scripture, Jean de Bayeux's strength didn't increase, but he discovered a few miraculous uses of the celestial demon blood scripture. No matter where Jean de Bayeux was, the celestial demon blood scripture would automatically sense the surroundings clearly, allowing him to see everything clearly. Moreover, Jean de Bayeux could easily see the strength of others, even if the opponent was far stronger than him. This time, Jean de Bayeux was able to sense Tang 13's presence because of the celestial demon blood scripture. Next, Jean Mingxin ordered his men to detain Tang 13. Now that Nie Tian hadn't recovered, Tang 13 naturally couldn't meet him. For the next 2 days, Lan Bingchen came to visit the Jin estate every day, accompanied by another person, Zhang Yifeng. However, Nie Tian was still recovering, so Lan Bingchen and Zhang Yifeng didn't see him. On the 3rd day, Lan Bingchen and Zhang Yifeng rushed to the Jin estate. This time, there was a 3rd person, the president of the Alchemist Guild, Xiao Luyang. Grandmaster Xiao. Jin Mingxin saw Xiao Luyang from afar and hurriedly cupped his hands, smiling. Grandmaster Xiao, your presence brings light to my humble abode. Xiao Luyang's white hair fluttered in the wind as he walked with a majestic gait. He was dressed in an alchemist's black robe with an alchemist badge pinned on his chest. There were 4 shiny golden lines on the badge, indicating that he was a 4th stage alchemist. Xiao Luyang was the president of the Alchemists Guild and the only 4th tier alchemist in the Blue Cloud Empire. Moreover, he was also an alchemist employed by the imperial family. His status in the Blue Cloud Empire was incomparably lofty. Even if the Blue Cloud Emperor saw him, he would have to show some respect and trepidation. President Jean, this seat doesn't want to beat around the bush. Please let Mr. Nie Tian come out. Xiao Luyang strode over, as if he was suppressing a lot of anger. Jin Mingxin was slightly stunned, thinking, why does Xiao Luyang look like he's going to punish me? Did Nie Tian offend him? But Nie Tian has been in the Jin estate these days. He hasn't even stepped out of the door. Thinking of this, Jin Mingxin smiled faintly. Grandmaster Xiao, to be honest, Mr. Nie Tian was injured by Commander Qin a few days ago. Mr. Nie was injured by Governor Qin a few days ago and was currently recuperating. He truly couldn't come out to meet guests. Please forgive me, Master Xiao. Jin Ming thought to himself. He glanced at Zhang Yifeng and saw that the latter was also drenched in cold sweat. It seemed that something big was about to happen. Xiao Luyang waved his long sleeve and angrily said, Mr. Nie Tian is really arrogant. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and Grandmaster Zhang Yifeng have come to invite him 3 times, but he unexpectedly closed the door and refused to meet them. Now that this old man has personally come to invite him, is he still going to close the door and refuse to meet me? Jin Mingxin slightly furrowed his brows and said, Grandmaster Zhao's words are too much. During the freshman martial meet of Tyrant Cloud Academy, Mr. Nie was severely injured by Qin Yetian. Countless people saw it, including His Highness the Crown Prince and Grandmaster Zhang Yifeng. Moreover, Mr. Nie consumed a Tier 3 Yuan burst pill at that time, and his body is extremely weak now. Grandmaster Xiao is an alchemy expert, so you're naturally more familiar with the might of a rank 3 Yuan burst pill than me. Without a month or 2, it will be very difficult for Mr. Nie to recover. Speaking up to here, Jin Mingxin was no longer polite. He coldly flicked his sleeve and said, Mr. Nie won't meet you. If Grandmaster Xiao has anything to say, we'll talk about it later. Xiao Luyang was the president of the Alchemist Association and had a respected status, but he, Jin Mingxin, wasn't someone to be trifled with. If you want to play hard with me, Then I'll accompany you to the end. President Jean, please calm down. Seeing Jean Mingxin's expression change, Lan Bingchen hurriedly stepped forward and said, Grandmaster Xiao was anxious and spoke too harshly. I hope President Jean can forgive him. Mr. Nie was injured by Commander Qin, and it was the royal family's fault. I apologize to Mr. Nie and President Jean on behalf of the royal family. Lan Bingchen's expression turned very unsightly as she said, but now, the royal family really needs Mr. Nie's help. Her Royal Highness the Princess's condition worsened a few days ago, and now she's on the verge of death. I hope President Jean can let Mr. Nie come out to see me. I can represent the royal family to agree to all of Mr. Nie's requests. Her Royal Highness the Princess is critically ill. Jean Mingxin frowned, suddenly understanding in his heart. No wonder Lan Bingchen was so anxious to see Nie Tian, and even brought Zhang Yifeng along. No wonder Xiao Luyang was so anxious, clamoring to see Nie Tian. So it turned out that Her Royal Highness the Princess was critically ill. The Blue Cloud Emperor, Lan Yunhai, had 5 sons, but only one daughter, Lan Bingxian. Lan Yunhai usually treated Lan Bingxian as the apple of his eye, doting on her very much. However, Lan Bingxian had been suffering from a strange illness since young, causing her body to be extremely weak. Although countless alchemists had tried to treat Lan Bingxian, it was a pity that her condition didn't improve. Instead, it worsened. Some time ago, the Qin clan invited a 4th-ranked alchemist, Gu Sanso, from the Feng Qin Empire to treat Lan Bingxian. Not only did Gu Sanso's condition not improve, it even worsened. Xiao Luyang had been treating Lan Bingxian since she was a baby, and the two of them had a father-daughter relationship. Lan Bingji was Lan Bingxuan's older brother, and the two of them were twins. He didn't care about his other brothers, but he cared about his younger sister very much. In fact, Lan Bingji knew that he had no hope of becoming Nie Tian's disciple, but for the sake of his younger sister, he still came to beg Nie Tian. Xiao Luyang originally didn't want to come, but Lan Bingxuan's life was on the line. In the whole Blue Cloud Empire, the only person who could save Lan Bingxian was Nie Tian. Nie Tian was someone who could make Zhang Yifeng willingly submit to and become his disciple. Even Xiao Luyang couldn't do this. A long time ago, Xiao Luyang had also revealed his intention to accept Zhang Yifeng as his disciple, but was unfortunately rejected by Zhang Yifeng. Jean Mingxin frowned, his brain was working furiously, considering whether he should call out Nie Tian. In fact, Jean Mingxin really wanted to call out to Nie Tian, but Nie Tian was indeed very weak at the moment. The side effects of the 3rd-ranked Yuan burst pill would not disappear for at least a month. President Jean, since this old man came today, I must see Nie Tian. Seeing that Jean Mingxin was still hesitating, Xiao Luyang said in a deep voice, Don't say that he's injured, even if he's about to die, he must come out to see me. Jean Mingxin slightly raised his head and said coldly, What does Grandmaster Xiao mean by this? Don't tell me you're threatening me? Xiao Luyang sneered and said in a cold voice, This Grandmaster's words are very clear. President Jean can interpret it however you want. But this Grandmaster wants to tell you that Nie Tian's life is not as important as you think. Her Highness the Princess's body is priceless. If something happens to her, His Majesty the Emperor's rage is not something you and I can bear. Zhang Yifeng's complexion immediately changed when Xiao Luyang's words came out. Saying that Nie Tian's life was cheap, Zhang Yifeng would be the first to disagree. It seemed that Xiao Luyang completely didn't know what kind of person Nie Tian was. Lan Bingchen also slightly frowned when she heard it. Xiao Luyang looked down on Nie Tian too much. He shouldn't have said such words. Pa, pa, pa. At this time, a crisp applause suddenly sounded behind everyone as a figure slowly walked over. It was none other than Nie Tian. Well said, Grandmaster Xiao. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up high, a pondering smile hanging on his face as he said, Since you think my life is cheap and Her Highness's life is precious, then why do you need to beg me? letting someone with a cheap life save someone with a precious life, while someone with a cheap life is not willing. Chapter 102. As soon as Nie Tian finished speaking, the entire place fell into dead silence. The oppressive silence was suffocating. Xiao Luyang's body suddenly trembled. He didn't expect Nie Tian to suddenly appear, and he didn't expect Nie Tian to be so domineering. Mr. Nie, teacher, Lan Bingchen and Zhang Yifeng saw that the situation wasn't right and spoke at the same time. Zhang Yifeng, whose disciple are you? Don't you know where you should stand? Nie Tianling didn't wait for Zhang Yifeng to finish speaking and spoke coldly. Nie Tian was angry, he was really angry. The other party had a favor to ask of him, yet he was still so overbearing and even said that his life was cheap. Uncle could tolerate such a thing, but sister-in-law couldn't. Zhang Yifeng felt an inexplicable tremble when he met Nie Tian's gaze, as if he was electrocuted, and beads of sweat immediately appeared on his forehead. Gulp. Zhang Yifeng swallowed a mouthful of saliva and automatically stood behind Nie Tian, not daring to say another word. Lan Bingchen's lips moved, but no sound came out. Jin Mingxin chose to watch from the side. If Xiao Luyang dared to use extreme methods, he, Jin Mingxin, would definitely not show weakness. Xiao Luyang's old face was gloomy, his white hair fluttered, and his entire body was trembling. "Stinking brat, you are courting death." A sinister voice came out of Xiao Luyang's throat. He was about to go crazy because of Nie Tian, and he was about to lose his rationality. "You have a cheap life, are you still afraid of death?" Nie Tian smiled faintly, with a mocking expression on his face. Right now, Nie Tian had completely recovered. 3 days in the primal chaos origin coffin was equivalent to 30 days in the outside world. Not only did he walk out of the side effects of the explosive Yuan pill, but his strength also increased, advancing to the 5th level of the origin spirit realm. More importantly, the power of stars in Nie Tian's body had already awakened 32 stars. Right now, his battle strength had doubled compared to a few days ago. Although Xiao Luyang's strength was at the 9th level of the Wanxiang realm, if they really fought, he might not be Nie Tian's opponent. After all, alchemists were not good at fighting. Xiao Luyang's old face flushed red as he forcibly suppressed the anger inside his body. He looked at Nie Tian and said in a cold voice, "This old man will ask you again. Are you going to treat the princess?" Nie Tian shook his head slightly. He couldn't help but smile and lightly said, "I'll tell you one more time. Send the guest off." At this time, Xiao Luyang did not understand the situation at all. He thought that Nie Tian was just an ordinary teenager with a bit of heaven-defying talent. As long as he said a few harsh words to make him realize the seriousness of the matter, Nie Tian would naturally submit. However, he was completely wrong. Nie Tian was the kind of person who didn't care about anything. No matter what Nie Tian did, he never considered the consequences. He only did what he liked, because he could bear any consequences. If Xiao Luyang spoke nicely, sincerely, politely, and with more self-restraint, perhaps Nie Tian would be happy and agree. But now it was impossible. Xiao Luyang's eyes turned red as though they were about to drip blood. As the president of the Alchemist Guild, his status was very high. At any time, as long as he said a word, there would be countless people who would listen and respond. But now, in front of a teenager, his words were useless. He couldn't accept such a result. If he didn't still have a little bit of rationality, he would have rushed up and burned Nie Tian to ashes. Xiao Luyang hated Nie Tian to the point of gnashing his teeth and gnashing his teeth. But he didn't dare to make a move against Nie Tian, because Nie Tian was Lan Bingxuan's only hope to survive. After struggling and hesitating for a long time, Xiao Luyang suddenly said, "Nie Tian, the princess is His Majesty's most beloved child. If you are willing to treat the princess, I can agree to all your requests on behalf of His Majesty." As soon as Xiao Luyang's words came out, Jin Mingxin, Lan Bingchen, Zhang Yifeng, and the others were shocked. Anyone could hear that Xiao Luyang was begging Nie Tian. Xiao Luyang had admitted defeat. Who would have thought that the dignified president of the Alchemists' Guild would admit defeat in front of Nie Tian? Nie Tian's eyebrows slightly raised, his face suddenly sank as he said, "All requests." Xiao Luyang nodded heavily and said, "All requests." Lan Bingchen thought that Nie Tian was tempted and said, "Mr. Nie, if you can save my imperial sister, I will agree to all of Mr. Nie's requests on behalf of the imperial family." Nie Tian smiled strangely, not looking at Lan Bingchen at all. Although Lan Bingchen was the crown prince, his authority was certainly not comparable to Xiao Luyang's. Nie Tian looked at Xiao Luyang with a burning gaze. A strange expression flashed in his eyes as he said, "What if I want Lan Bingji to die?" As soon as the words left his mouth, the whole audience went silent. No one thought that Nie Tian's request would be this. Lan Bingchen was also stunned. When he reacted, he couldn't wait for Xiao Luyang to nod and agree. Of course, this was impossible. Lan Bingji was a prince and Lan Yunhai's most beloved prince. Sacrificing Lan Bingji to save Lan Bingxian was obviously impossible. Xiao Luyang suppressed his anger and said in a cold voice, "Mr. Nie, I know that Prince Bingji offended you in the freshman martial meet. But you want him to die? This is going too far. I can guarantee that if you save the princess, Prince Bingji will apologize to you and will never cause trouble for you again. What do you think?" Nie Tian shook his head with a smile and replied, "Not much." Of course, Nie Tian didn't want to kill Lan Bingji. He just wanted to know what position Lan Bingji held in the emperor's heart and how much authority Xiao Luyang had. From Xiao Luyang's reply, he still had some authority in the Blue Cloud Empire, at least enough to make Lan Bingji fear him. "What do you mean, Mr. Nie?" Xiao Luyang's face sank. Nie Tian said indifferently, "My meaning is very clear. Your proposal is not much and I won't accept it. You can leave." Xiao Luyang's face stiffened as if he had heard wrong. "President Jin, I still have something to do and will take my leave first." Before everyone could come back to their senses, Nie Tian smiled faintly, bid farewell to Jin Mingxin and left. "Yifeng, come with me." Nie Tian's footsteps suddenly stopped and he shouted. Zhang Yifeng hurriedly followed. Only until Nie Tian and Zhang Yifeng's figures disappeared did Xiao Luyang and Lan Bingchen regain their senses. "President Jin, Mr. Nie, he." Lan Bingchen looked at Jin Mingxin blankly, not knowing what to say. Jin Mingxin shook his head and shrugged, expressing that he was unable to help even if he wanted to. Xiao Luyang's body trembled, his face was gloomy, and his breathing was unstable as he stood on the spot, his eyes staring fixedly at the direction where Nie Tian disappeared. Within his eyes, anger, shock, resentment, humiliation, fear, and doubt converged into an indescribable, extremely complicated divine radiance. If looks could kill, Nie Tian would have long been dismembered into thousands of pieces. Jin Mingxin also felt stupefied as he looked at the direction where Nie Tian left. He didn't dare to believe that Nie Tian actually refused to treat the princess. One must know that Lan Bingxian was Lan Yunhai's most beloved person. If Nie Tian really cured Lan Bingxian, then no one would dare to stop him in the Blue Cloud Empire. Chapter 103. Nie Tian brought Zhang Yifeng to a secluded courtyard in the Jin residence. "Teacher, this disciple has misspoken. Please punish me." Seeing that there was no one around, Zhang Yifeng knelt down in fear. "Get up first," Nie Tian said with a smile. Zhang Yifeng thought that Nie Tian called him over to punish him. Zhang Yifeng stood up in fear and didn't dare to raise his head. "Let me ask you, what illness does the princess have?" Nie Tian asked indifferently, not caring what Zhang Yifeng was thinking. Zhang Yifeng was startled and thought that he had heard wrongly. Didn't Nie Tian refuse to treat the princess just now? Why did he suddenly ask about her illness? "I'm asking you a question. Didn't you hear me?" Nie Tian urged in a deep voice. Zhang Yifeng hurriedly said, "Teacher, the princess has a strange illness. Her body has been weak since she was young and can't cultivate. Although countless alchemy masters have treated her, no one has been able to find anything. So, I don't know what illness the princess has. Can't cultivate? Nia Tian was startled and continued to ask, "Is there a problem with the princess's yuan meridians?" "No problem," Zhang Yifeng replied and added, "The strangest thing is that the princess can't take any spirit pills or herbs. Once she takes a spirit pill, her body will swell up and she will fall into a coma. It will take a long time for her to recover." "I see." Nia Tian nodded. He already had a guess in his heart and asked, "What happened to the princess this time? Why did she suddenly fall ill?" Zhang Yifeng raised his head slightly and said, "Teacher, do you remember Grandmaster Gu? Gu Sanso?" Nia Tian was slightly startled. "Yes." Zhang Yifeng nodded and said, "Grandmaster Gu was specially invited by the Qin clan from the Feng Qin Empire to treat the princess. Grandmaster Gu gave the princess a grade 5 spirit pill, the 7 treasure spirit pill. After that, the princess's condition worsened and she has been in a coma for 3 days. It is said that her body is swollen and has black spots. Master Gu and Master Xiao really have no way to save the princess. That's why they asked teacher for help." The corners of Nie Tian's mouth curled up slightly. He glanced at Zhang Yifeng and said, "You recommended me to them, right?" Zhang Yifeng's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly knelt down and said anxiously, "This disciple is worried about the princess's illness. Please forgive me, teacher." Nie Tian had guessed correctly. It was Zhang Yifeng who had recommended Nie Tian to the emperor, which was why Xiao Luyang and Lan Bingchen had appeared. Seeing how frightened Zhang Yifeng was, Nie Tian could not help but laugh. He shook his head and said, "Why are you so cowardly, kneeling at the slightest provocation? In the future, you are not allowed to kneel without my permission, do you hear me?" "Yes." Zhang Yifeng was drenched in cold sweat, but he didn't get up. Suddenly, he looked at Nie Tian with a strange look in his eyes and said emotionally, "Teacher, please treat the princess. This disciple begs you." Nie Tian looked at Zhang Yifeng seriously. Seeming to have thought of something, he asked, "You know this princess?" "Yes." Zhang Yifeng nodded heavily. "What's the story between you and her? Tell me." Nie Tian was very knowledgeable and shrewd. Zhang Yifeng's expression just now revealed a lot of information. There must be a story between him and the princess. Zhang Yifeng lowered his head, looking a little embarrassed. After thinking for a while, he said, "This disciple used to be a beggar. When I was 10 years old, I was lucky enough to meet the princess. She was kind-hearted and gave me a gold coin when she saw me being pitiful. That gold coin saved me from starving to death on the street. Later, this disciple obtained the devil fire by chance, and became who I am today." After saying that, Zhang Yifeng seemed to remember a lot, and his expression became gloomy. "That's it?" Nie Tian was quite interested in listening to the story. "Yes." Zhang Yifeng nodded, but he still had something to say. That year, Lan Bingxian not only gave Zhang Yifeng a gold coin, but also smiled at him. Zhang Yifeng would never forget Lan Bingxuan's smile that day. It was so pure and beautiful. To him, it was the most beautiful smile in the world. He was willing to give everything for that smile, even his life. "Teacher, this disciple is begging you, save the princess. She is the kindest person in the world, she shouldn't die so young." Zhang Yifeng's eyes were filled with tears when he said this. Nie Tian looked at Zhang Yifeng and sighed in his heart. What is love in the world? It makes people live and die for it. Sigh. No matter how monstrous a person is, they can't escape love. Alright, you can get up. I already know about the princess' illness. She won't die. Nie Tian said lightly. Zhang Yifeng was very excited and jumped up. Teacher is willing to save the princess? Nie Tian said with a bitter smile. If I don't save her, you will hate me for the rest of your life. This disciple doesn't dare. Zhang Yifeng lowered his head and smiled. At this moment, He suddenly felt that there was a very strong confidence in Nye Tian, like a tall mountain that people could look up to. "Teacher, do you know what illness Her Highness has?" Zhang Yifeng asked immediately. Nye Tian nodded and said, "If my guess is correct, the princess shouldn't be sick. It's just that her physique is different from ordinary people." 10,000 poison body. Nye Tian guessed that Lan Bingxian might have the legendary 10,000 poison body. 10,000 poison body, it belonged to a type of spiritual body, similar to Ling Tian's lotus sacred body. However, the 10,000 poison body was much more terrifying than the lotus sacred body. It should belong to the high-grade yellow rank spiritual body. On the other hand, the lotus sacred physique was only the lowest grade of yellow rank low-level spiritual physique of heaven and earth. "What does teacher mean? This disciple doesn't understand," Zhang Yifeng said with a puzzled face. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, "You don't need to understand, go out with teacher for a while now." "Where?" Zhang Yifeng was even more puzzled. "To a place that specializes in selling poisonous herb." Nye Tian nodded with a smile. "Then Her Highness." Zhang Yifeng had a worried face, afraid that Lan Bingxian wouldn't be able to hold on. Nye Tian teased in a relaxed manner, "Don't worry, your princess will be fine, she won't die anytime soon. With the 10,000 poison body, she won't die so easily." With Nye Tian's guarantee, Zhang Yifeng felt a lot more at ease and hurriedly followed behind Nye Tian. Only now did Zhang Yifeng realize that Nye Tian had already completely recovered. There wasn't a single trace of weakness on his body. "How is this possible? I saw teacher consume a rank 3 yuan burst pill with my own eyes. Could it be that the side effect of the yuan burst pill disappeared?" Zhang Yifeng was shocked. He felt that this teacher of his was becoming more and more mysterious. He was becoming more and more unable to be measured with common sense. "Boss!" Just when Nye Tian and Zhang Yifeng walked to the entrance of Jin residence, they bumped into Jin Debao and the others. When Nye Tian saw Nye Yuro and Xiao Guai's round stomachs, it wasn't hard for him to guess that Jin Debao must have brought everyone to first-grade residence to eat and drink. "Big brother Nye Tian, missed you so much." Nye Yuro jogged over. She seemed to be very happy. Qiushan and the others, on the other hand, had a look of astonishment on their faces. They originally thought that it would take at least a month for Nye Tian to leave his room. Nye Tian pinched Nye Yuro's little face and said with a smile, "Ninth sister, you have become fat again." "Of course not." Nye Yuro pouted, pointed at Xiao Guai who was in her arms and said, "Xiao Guai is the one who has become fat." Looking at Xiao Guai who was in Nye Yuro's arms, Nye Tian was quite shocked. Chapter 104. One had to know that Xiao Guai was not even a month old. When it hatched, it was only the size of a baby's fist. Though it had grown a lot, Xiao Guai was still very sleepy. It was currently sleeping soundly in Nye Yuro's arms. "Boss, where are you and Master Zhang going?" Jin Debao saw that Nye Tian and his disciple were obviously going out and asked. Jin Debao was in a good mood these few days, because the Qin family had sent over the rank 4 Golden Thunder battle armor 3 days ago. He was already wearing it. Some things. Nye Tian wanted to fool around. But Nye Yuro quickly said, "I want to go too." Nye Tian saw Nye Yuro's pleading look and could only nod. Jin Debao and the others naturally went with them. "You want to come too?" Nye Tian suddenly said. "You managed to escape?" Jin Debao was also surprised. Qiushan, Ling and the others were shocked. They didn't know who Nye Tian and Jin Debao were talking to. "All right. I'll come too." Tang 13's figure appeared like a ghost, scaring Qiushan and the others. "Boss, this guy is really your friend?" Jin Debao looked at Tang 13 in shock. Tang 13 was originally captured by Jin Mingxin and locked in the woodshed. He didn't think he would escape. Nye Tian nodded and asked Jin Debao, "How did you find him?" Nye Tian was able to detect Tang 13's existence because his psychic power was very strong and his perception was extraordinary. But Jean de Bao was just a rookie at the first level of the origin spirit realm. How could he sense Tang 13? Jean de Bao snickered and said proudly, "I found him when I wanted to." Nie Tian shook his head, guessing that Jean de Bao's Yuan spirit was different from others. Since he wasn't willing to say, then he naturally wouldn't ask. After all, every martial artist had their own secret. Walking out of the Jean Manor, the group headed towards the martial market in the center of Blue Cloud City. Wu City. Almost every big city had one. As the name suggested, the items traded in the martial market were all related to the cultivation of martial artists. There were spirit pills, spirit weapons, spirit beasts, slaves, and large-scale auctions. The martial city was located in the heart of the royal city. Despite its small size, it was the heart of the royal city. In fact, it was even more bustling than the royal palace and the apothecary guild. The entrance to the martial market was heavily guarded by the imperial city's guards, and not just anyone could enter. Arriving at the entrance of the martial market, Jean de Bao paid the entrance fee of 1,000 gold coins before everyone could enter. The Wu City was divided into 5 regions: the medicine market, the soldier market, the beast market, the slave market, and the auction house. After entering Wu City, Nie Tian and the others did not go to the 5 regions. Instead, they were led by a servant towards a dense forest at the edge of the city. "Everyone, the black market is just ahead. Follow this path and you'll see it at the end." The manservant pointed at the deep path in front of him and said with a smile. Jean de Bao gave the manservant 1,000 gold coins as a reward, and the manservant left. "Boss, are we really going to the black market? My dad said that the black market is a forbidden area in the royal city. Once you enter, it's useless even if you're a prince. The black market is not controlled by the royal family." Jean de Bao looked at the dark path in front of him with a face full of hesitation. The black market was the 6th unknown area of the Wu City. The reason why Nie Tian wanted to enter the black market was to buy large amounts of poisonous herbs. Lan Bingxian had the body of 1,000 poisons. Only by feeding her poison could her body improve. However, there were very few places that sold poisonous herbs. Even the apothecary guild only had a few kinds of poisonous herbs. Without a choice, Nie Tian decided to come to the black market. However, the black market was the most special existence in the royal city. It was not controlled by the royal family, and the environment inside was extremely dangerous. Normal people would not dare to enter. "Don't worry." Nie Tian smiled faintly and looked at Tang 13 meaningfully. "With him here, it'll be fine." Jean de Bao looked at Tang 13 suspiciously. "He's only at the 9th level of the origin spirit realm. Is he that strong?" Tang 13 froze slightly and then smiled. "Little fatty, are you looking down on me?" Actually, Tang 13 was very curious how Jean de Bao knew his strength. That's right, Tang 13's current strength was indeed at the 9th level of the origin spirit realm. Just 2 months ago, he was only at the 5th level of the origin spirit realm. In a short 2 months, his strength increased by 4 small realms. It was terrifying. Nie Tian was not too surprised. Tang 13 had the ghost eye. As the ghost eye became more and more terrifying, his strength would only increase faster and faster in the future. Also, Nie Tian knew that Tang 13 was an assassin from the Blood Bat Gate. With him around, he was more or less at ease. Jean de Bao couldn't stand Tang 13's pretentious manner. He snorted and didn't say anything else. "Let's go." Nie Tian smiled faintly and didn't waste any more time. Just as Nie Tian and the others entered the small path, a ghost-like figure appeared. Tang Yuyu looked at the backs of Nie Tian and the others. The corner of her mouth curled up coldly. She laughed sinisterly in her heart. "Nie Tian, since you've come to the black market, don't go back." Tang Yuyu had been waiting for Nie Tian to come out of the Jean Manor these past few days. However, she didn't dare to make a move in Blue Cloud City. Who would have thought that Nie Tian would actually come to the black market? This was an unexpected surprise for Tang Yuyu. But at this moment, Tang Yuyu had a strange feeling. She kept thinking of Tang 13, and that blurry face would mysteriously appear in her mind. Could it be that I'm too nervous? Tang Yuyu calmed down. Nie Tian was the only person who made her fail. She wouldn't allow herself to fail a second time. Thinking of this, Tang Yuyu didn't stay any longer and quickly followed. Nie Tian and the others walked along the small path. When they reached the end, what appeared in front of them wasn't a forest, but a bustling market. There was only a layer of dense forest between the black market and the martial market. Is this the legendary black market? There's nothing special about it. Jean de Bao looked at the market in front of him. It wasn't much different from an ordinary market. The worry on his face lessened a little. Little fatty, you'll know what's special about the black market soon. Tang 13 teased. Her eyes seemed to be looking behind her. Maybe it was her killer's instinct, but Tang 13 kept feeling that someone was following her. This feeling made her uneasy. He had never felt this way before. Who's there? Just as Nie Tian stepped into the martial market, two huge figures suddenly appeared. The two black-clothed martial artists were more than 2 meters tall. They looked like iron towers. Their entire bodies were filled with ferocious auras, giving people great pressure. Nie Tian looked at the two people who suddenly appeared and frowned slightly. He was a little shocked. I didn't expect the two watchdogs of the black market to be at the 5th tier of the all creations realm. Greetings, warriors. We're here to buy some medicinal ingredients, Nie Tian said calmly. Is this your first time at the black market? One of the black-clothed martial artists glanced at Nie Tian and the others. He didn't find anything strange and asked in a deep voice. Yes. Nie Tian nodded slightly. Chapter 105. 10,000 gold coins. Jean de Bao jumped in fright. 10,000 gold coins could almost buy a rank 3 spirit pill. Was the black market made of gold? Just the entrance fee was 10,000 gold coins. With a faint smile, Nie Tian gestured to Jean de Bao to hand over the money. Jean de Bao didn't have much, but he had a lot of money. Eating a meal could cost 10,000 gold coins, so paying an entrance fee of tens of thousands was nothing to Jean de Bao. Nie Tian obviously knew that these two people saw that they didn't have any strong people, so they were ruthlessly extorting them. But Nie Tian didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble. If he could use gold coins to solve the problem, there was no need to resort to force. Jean de Bao took out 7 low-grade essence crystals from his interspatial ring and handed them to the black-clothed cultivators. In the world of cultivators, metal coins were the lowest form of currency. High-grade transactions were directly replaced by essence crystals. Low-grade essence crystals were worth 10,000 gold coins, mid-grade essence crystals were worth 10,000 gold coins, and of course, there were high-grade essence crystals and top-grade essence crystals. The two black-clothed cultivators took the essence crystals and their attitude immediately changed. They said respectfully, I'm called Zhu Wan, this is my brother Zhu Qian. What medicinal ingredients does young master want to buy? We brothers are willing to help. Zhu Wan saw that Jean de Bao was generous, and it was obvious that Nie Tian was the leader of this group, so he subconsciously thought that Nie Tian must have an extraordinary background. Maybe he was the young master of some hidden family, so he immediately licked his boots like a pug. This is our first time coming to the black market, so we're not familiar with everything here. I see that you two are very strong, so I want to invite you two to be our guards to ensure our safety in the black market. Is that okay? Nie Tian smiled faintly, appearing gentle and refined. The black market was after all an unsafe place. It would be best if there were 2 guards. Although Zhu Wan and Zhu Qian's strength wasn't at the peak, they were enough to be guards. Zhu Wan smiled and bowed. I'm willing to serve young master. Nie Tian nodded and said, De Bao, give a mid-grade essence crystal to Zhu Wan. Jean de Bao pursed his lips. Although he was slightly unwilling, he still took out a mid-grade essence crystal and passed it to Zhu Wan. Ju Wan beamed with joy when he got a piece of mid-grade origin crystal. His face was like a blooming chrysanthemum. Nie Tian didn't care much about it. Money was just a worldly possession and had no value to him. I want to buy some highly toxic herbs. Please lead the way. Nie Tian didn't bother being polite with Ju Wan and Ju Qian. If young master wants to buy medicinal ingredients, let's go to the Dan Hart Pavilion. Ju Wan was very happy as he respectfully led the way. After a while, Ju Wan brought Nie Tian and the others into a shop called Dan Hart Pavilion. The Dan Hart Pavilion was located in a remote corner of the black market. Furthermore, the shop was very old, giving people a very shabby feeling. Nie Tian walked into the shop and smiled when he saw the herbs on display. Zhang Yifeng followed closely by Nie Tian's side. This was his first time coming to the black market, and his first time seeing non-traditional medicinal herbs. Zhang Yifeng was very surprised because he hadn't seen almost half of these herbs before. At this time, a gray-robed old man with a goatee appeared beside Nie Tian. He squinted his shrewd eyes and asked with a smile, "Young master, what do you want to buy?" Nie Tian was slightly startled. He turned around and gave the old man a deep look. This old man was not simple. He could actually appear beside Nie Tian without a sound. If he didn't take the initiative to speak, Nie Tian wouldn't even notice his existence. He was definitely a Pill Dao expert. Nie Tian guessed that this old man's mental strength was definitely above the 50th rank. 50th rank, that was a 5th rank pill master. A 5th rank pill master was definitely a supreme existence in the Blue Cloud Empire. Nie Tian was very curious. Why would a Pill Dao master stay in the black market of a third-rate empire? The old man smiled faintly and said, "This old man is Gu Yi, the shopkeeper of the Dan Hart Pavilion. Old man Gu, this young master wants to buy some highly toxic medicinal herbs. Don't you usually like to tinker with some poisonous pills? There must be a lot of highly toxic medicinal herbs." Ju Wan seemed to be very familiar with Gu Yi as he said carelessly. Nie Tian glanced at Ju Wan and guessed that he didn't know Gu Yi's true strength at all. If Ju Wan knew that Gu Yi was a 5th-rank pill master, he didn't know if he would still talk to him like this. Gu Yi thought nothing of it as he gave Nie Tian a strange look and said with a smile, "Young master wants to buy highly toxic medicinal herbs?" Nie Tian nodded his head lightly and said, "Master Gu, this one is Nie Tian. I want to buy some 3rd-rank and 4th-rank toxic medicinal herbs, the more the better." Zhang Yifeng gave Nie Tian a strange look. This was the first time he saw Nie Tian being so respectful in front of others. "The more the better?" Gu Yi chuckled but asked, "Young Master Nie, don't blame this old man for talking too much. This old man wants to know, what does young master want these highly toxic medicinal herbs for?" "To save people." Nie Tian had a calm face and was extremely indifferent. "Save people? I think it's more like to harm people," Ju Wan said in his heart. It was no wonder. Who would believe that highly toxic medicinal herbs could save people? Gu Yi looked at Nie Tian seriously, as if he was making sure that the latter wasn't lying. "All right." Gu Yi finally nodded his head and said, "Young Master Nie said that whatever medicinal herbs you want to buy, as long as the Dan Hart Pavilion has it, we can sell it to you. And we can sell it to you at a low price." Gu Yi suddenly took a look at Zhang Yifeng and added. Nie Tian nodded his head lightly and said, "Soul-devouring flower, heart-rotting grass, black essence stone, white leaf empty lotus." Nie Tian listed out tens of highly toxic medicinal herbs in one breath, causing everyone to be dumbfounded. Even Zhang Yifeng went into a daze when he heard that, because he had never heard of many of the medicinal herbs. Gu Yi had a calm face and said, "I have most of the medicinal herbs, young Master Nie, please wait for a moment." Gu Yi turned around and left. Zhang Yifeng hurriedly grabbed onto the opportunity and asked Nie Tian about the various medicinal herbs that were placed in the hall. Nie Tian answered them one by one. In the entire hall, He knew all the medicinal herbs like the back of his hand. Everyone else was dumbstruck. They didn't expect that Nye Tian would be so knowledgeable about various medicinal herbs. The Ju Wan and Ju Qian brothers were also in disbelief. The way they looked at Nye Tian slowly changed, becoming more respectful. "Teacher, what is this?" Suddenly, Zhang Yifeng's gaze was attracted by a black stone that was placed in the center of the hall. The black stone was the size of a fist and was completely black. Upon closer inspection, there were actually faint dark patterns distributed on the surface of the black stone. The circles were like ripples in the water, extremely orderly. When Nye Tian saw this black stone, his expression changed. Star Soul Stone. Nye Tian was shocked. He didn't expect that he would actually see a piece of Star Soul Stone here. Star Soul Stone, a 7th-rank spiritual material, was formed from the crystallization of a meteorite and was extremely rare. Actually, to be precise, Star Soul Stones weren't medicinal herbs and didn't have any medicinal value. Star Soul Stones were mainly used to refine spirit weapons. The reason why Nye Tian was interested in Star Soul Stones was not because Star Soul Stones were really very precious, but because he was in dire need of Star Soul Stones right now. Nye Tian's sword Absolute Heaven Slash was still a broken sword. He had always wanted to refine sword Absolute Heaven Slash again, but he hadn't been able to find suitable materials. Chapter 106. Nye Tian of course did not expect the Star Soul Stone to restore the sword Absolute Heaven Slash to a level 9 divine weapon, but at least it could make the sword Absolute Heaven Slash complete and no longer a broken sword. Once the sword Absolute Heaven Slash was repaired, Nye Tian could once again cultivate the sword technique he created in his previous life. Ao Sword Art. In his previous life, Nye Tian was obsessed with the way of the sword, and his comprehension of the way of the sword had already reached the extreme realm, possessing his own unique, profound meaning of the sword. Nye Tian fused several kinds of heaven-grade sword techniques, studied them for several years, and finally created a set of sword technique, naming it Ao Sword Art. After rebirth, because he did not have a suitable sword, Nye Tian did not use the Ao Sword Art. Ao Sword Art was a supreme sword technique that surpassed heaven grade. If he used a broken sword, it would be too humiliating. This is a Star Soul Stone, a 7th grade spiritual material. But it is not a medicinal material, but a material for refining spirit weapons. Nye Tian explained while staring at the Star Soul Stone. He had already made up his mind that he must obtain the Star Soul Stone. The sword Absolute Heaven Slash was originally forged from the Heart of Stars, and was very compatible with the Star Soul Stone. Nye Tian did not want to miss such a good opportunity. A material for refining spirit weapons. Zhang Yifeng nodded slightly, obviously not too interested. At this time, Gu Yi walked out from the inner hall and said with a clear laugh, "I really did not expect that at such a young age, young Master Nye not only knows all kinds of medicinal materials like the back of his hand, but also dabbled in spiritual materials. It really makes this old man have a whole new level of respect, as expected of a young genius." Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, "Old Gu is overpraising me." Gu Yi walked over and opened the storage bag, and a variety of medicinal materials appeared on the table. There were at least 10 types. When these medicinal materials came out, everyone immediately smelled a pungent smell. It was very complicated and hard to describe. Nye Tian only swept a glance and said, "Old Gu, there is no problem with the medicinal materials. Keep them." Gu Yi nodded, kept all the medicinal materials, and directly handed the storage bag to Nye Tian, and said, "A total of 30 medicinal materials, 4 portions of each, and all of them are 4th grade. According to the market price, a 4th-tier medicinal herb is between 10,000 gold coins to 100,000 gold coins. This old man calculates the lowest price for young Master Nye, 10,000 gold coins. All the medicinal ingredients add up to a total of 1,200,000 gold coins. This old man will give young Master Nye a discount and charge you 1,000,000 gold coins. What does young Master Nye think? 1,000,000 gold coins. Just as Gu Yi finished speaking, everyone's jaws dropped, their faces filled with disbelief. No one would have thought that this pile of medicinal herbs would be so expensive. Geezer Gu, you're not trying to scam young Master Nye because he's young, are you? Ju Wan asked in a low, muffled voice. Gu Yi chuckled and said, My price is absolutely fair. Young Master Nye is extremely clear on this. Yes. Nye Tian nodded and said, Old Gu's price is very fair and gave me a great discount. But I will not let old Gu suffer. How about this? I'm willing to pay 2,000,000 gold coins to buy these herbs. 2,000,000 gold coins. This time, Ju Wan was completely stunned. There was actually a buyer who took the initiative to increase the price of the seller, and the price was directly doubled. Ju Wan looked suspiciously at Nye Tian, thinking in his heart, this kid is really a sucker. His head was either kicked by a donkey or squeezed by a door. Nye Tian naturally had his own reasons for increasing the price. Firstly, these medicinal ingredients were indeed worth the price, and secondly, he wanted to be on good terms with Gu Yi, to pave the way for the Star Soul Stone. Since young Master Nye is so courteous, this old man will not refuse. Gu Yi chuckled, of course he agreed. Behind Nye Tian, Jean de Bao had a bitter expression on his face. Luckily, he brought a lot of money, otherwise he wouldn't be able to afford it. Nye Tian was worried that Jean de Bao didn't bring enough money, which was why he said 2,000,000 gold coins. Otherwise, he would definitely offer more than 5,000,000 gold coins. In any case, the money would definitely be paid by the royal family, and it would be doubled. Who asked these medicinal ingredients to be used for the princess treatment? After Jean de Bao paid, Nye Tian's gaze was fixed on the Star Soul Stone. Gu Yi was a sly old fox. How could he not understand Nye Tian's meaning, and immediately said with a smile, Young Master Nye, this Star Soul Stone is our shop's treasure. No matter how much young Master Nye offers, this old man will not sell it. Although Gu Yi rejected with a smile, it was really difficult to make him change his mind. Nye Tian wasn't anxious and said with a smile, Is old Gu a grandmaster refiner? No. Gu Yi shook his head with a smile. Nye Tian nodded with a smile and said, Old Gu opened the Dan Hart Pavilion. It doesn't seem appropriate to use a spiritual material used to refine spirit weapons as the shop's treasure. Gu Yi's face instantly stiffened and said, Although the main use of the Star Soul Stone is not to refine pills, it is rare. Moreover, this is a gift from a friend, so this old man is using it as the shop's treasure. Nye Tian continued to smile, and finally got to the main topic and said, To be honest, I really need the Star Soul Stone. I would like to ask old Gu to part with it. Gu Yi didn't speak, and only smiled as he shook his head. Nye Tian said, I have a 7th-tier medicinal herb here. It's even rarer than the Star Soul Stone, and I want to use it to exchange for the Star Soul Stone with old Gu. I wonder if old Gu is interested? 7th-tier medicinal herb. Gu Yi's eyes suddenly lit up, and a strange expression flashed across his wrinkled face, as he was obviously very interested, and said, Why don't young Master Nye take out the medicinal herb for me to see? Nye Tian nodded his head lightly, and took out a stalk of strange whisker-like medicinal herb from his storage bag. When Zhang Yifeng saw the medicinal herb in Nye Tian's hands, his expression couldn't help but stiffen. The medicinal herb in Nye Tian's hands was none other than the purple dragon whisker that he had obtained from the Alchemist Association. This is actually a 7th-tier medicinal herb. Zhang Yifeng's heart trembled. No wonder Nye Tian insisted on obtaining the purple dragon whisker that day. Nye Tian passed the purple dragon whisker to Gu Yi, but didn't speak, and waited for Gu Yi to appraise it himself. If Gu Yi didn't recognize the purple dragon whisker, then Nye Tian couldn't do anything about it. Gu Yi received the purple dragon whisker, and directly lifted up the long snake tail. When he saw the purple dragon whisker, his expression changed, and he immediately laughed out loud. It's really the purple dragon whisker. So the ancient book's records about the snake tail root is real, the purple dragon whisker really exists. Seeing Gu Yi's excited look, Nie Tian's worried heart finally relaxed. Young Master Nie, this old man is willing to use the Star Soul Stone to exchange for the purple dragon whisker. Gu Yi's face was agitated, and he was extremely excited. Luckily Gu Yi had once read about the description of the snake tail root in an ancient book, and it had mentioned the purple dragon whisker in detail, otherwise he really wouldn't know that the purple dragon whisker still existed in this world. Deal. Nie Tian smiled faintly, he was naturally happy. Exchanging the Star Soul Stone and the purple dragon whisker, both parties got what they wanted, and no one suffered a loss. After completing the exchange, Gu Yi carefully placed the purple dragon whisker at the place where the Star Soul Stone was originally stored, and the smile on his old face was like a blooming chrysanthemum, extremely brilliant. Nie Tian got the Star Soul Stone and no longer stayed. He turned around and prepared to leave. Young Master Nie, please wait. Gu Yi called out to Nie Tian at this moment. Is there anything else, old Gu? Nie Tian turned around, as he was really a little afraid that Gu Yi would go back on his words. Gu Yi chuckled, but walked to Nie Tian's side and said in a low voice, Young Master Nie, you seem to have offended someone, there's a tail following you outside. Chapter 107. Nie Tian's complexion changed drastically. He spread out his divine sense, but nothing was out of place within a few hundred meters. To be able to escape the detection of my divine sense, the other party is definitely a professional killer. Could it be the person who appeared at the freshman martial meet? Nie Tian's heart trembled. Of course, he wouldn't forget that during the freshman martial meet, when he and Qin Yetian were fighting, someone had tried to assassinate him. Gu Yi nodded his head slightly and said in a soft voice, The other party is a hidden expert, and his strength is very strong. Young Master Nie must be careful. Finished speaking, Gu Yi let out another hearty laugh, loudly saying, Young Master Nie, take care, this old man won't see you off. Obviously, Gu Yi was only reminding Nie Tian out of goodwill, and he didn't want to bring trouble upon himself. Old Gu, I will take my leave. Nie Tian nodded towards Gu Yi, guessing in his heart that Gu Yi's spiritual energy should have reached the 60th level and above, at least a 6th-tier alchemist. However, alchemist's battle power was not that strong, so not to mention that Gu Yi would not help, even if he wanted to, he might not be able to. Walking out of the Dan Hart Pavilion, Nie Tian immediately became cautious. His current strength was at the 5th level of the Origin Spirit Realm, and he had awakened 32 stars of astral energy. But he did not have any astral souls on him, so his battle prowess was much weaker compared to a few days ago. Qiu Shan, Tang 13, we're being followed. The opponent is a master. Be careful. Nie Tian's face didn't change as he secretly sent a message to Qiu Shan and Tang 13. Qiu Shan and Tang 13 were not weak on Nie Tian's side. As for the Zhu Wan and Zhu Qian brothers, they were only temporary guards. If they were to fight, they would definitely run away. Tang 13 did not react, but Qiu Shan's expression changed. He subconsciously looked around. Tang Yuyu, who was hiding in the dark, noticed this subtle movement. Damn it, I've been discovered by them. Tang Yuyu's face sank slightly. He already knew that the other party had discovered him. Originally, Tang Yuyu wanted to find a more suitable place and time to make her move, but now, she couldn't wait any longer. Nie Tian, die. Tang Yuyu's heart trembled, his lips quivering. To be able to die under my counter-cross / your title as the Rookie King is not in vain. As soon as Tang Yuyu's voice fell, she opened her palm in the next moment. The two black feather blades seemed illusory as they formed a strange cross. Kill. With a palm strike, the cross-shaped crow feather blade caused space to tremble. Soon after, like a river bursting its banks, a frightening aura suddenly erupted and attacked Nie Tian at lightning speed. At this moment, Tang Yuyu was 300 to 400 meters away from Nye Tian and the others. For Tang Yuyu to actually attack from such a distance, it was enough to show her confidence in her own strength. The reverse cross kill arrived in the blink of an eye. When he was about 100 meters away from Nye Tian felt that something was wrong. Cold. In an instant Nye Tian felt an extreme chill. This was a bone-chilling feeling that made one feel a deep sense of despair. Oh no! At that critical moment, Nye Tian's heart suddenly trembled. At this moment, he still had time to dodge. However, if he dodged, Nye Yuro, Zhang Yifeng, and the others behind him would undoubtedly die. At this moment, Nye Tian did not have any star souls. Even if he forcefully used the 3 seals of the God of War, he would not be able to display its power. There was only one path in front of Nye Tian: resist the reverse cross kill. 17th Sword. At the moment of life and death, Nye Tian's absolute heaven slash appeared in his hand. He drew a circle in the air, and a near-perfect sword shield appeared. 17th Sword. This was the move of Nye Tian's proud sword art. This was the first time he used the proud sword art in this life, and it was for defense. At the same time, the 10 yuan meridians in Nye Tian's body revolved crazily. The first stage of the 9 Extremes War God Art, Golden Sky Battle Armor, was activated. Nye Tian had already decided to take this reverse cross slash head-on. Everything happened in an instant. Everyone saw Nye Tian suddenly move, but they had no idea what was going on. Bang! In the next moment, the powerful reverse cross kill struck the sword shield head-on, causing sparks and sparks to fly. Crack! Bang! The sword shield couldn't block the reverse cross kill and shattered. Nye Tian's body was hit by the powerful shockwave, and he was forced to retreat. A 10-meter-long crack appeared on the ground. After retreating a dozen meters, Nye Tian finally steadied his body. Pfft! Then, Nye Tian's chest tightened, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. 17th Sword and the Golden Sky Battle Armor's defense finally allowed Nye Tian to withstand the fatal blow. Big Brother Nye Tian. In the next moment, Nye Yuro was the first to react, and she shouted out loud. "Don't come near me!" Nye Tian roared. He already knew that the opponent's target was him, and anyone who came near him would be in danger. Qiu Shan, Tang 13, Zhang Yifeng, and the others all paled. They looked into the distance in terror, but they didn't see anyone. A top-notch assassin. Tang 13 was shocked. She couldn't believe that Nye Tian could sense the opponent's presence under these circumstances, and even defend himself. If Gu Yi hadn't warned him, Nye Tian wouldn't have been so nervous. He wouldn't have been able to react in such a short time, and he would have become a corpse. "Who's there? How dare you act so presumptuously in the black market? You're courting death!" Juwan roared. He didn't understand the situation at all, thinking that the person in the dark was just an ordinary assassin. Ju Wan and Ju Qian were well-known figures in the black market, and they couldn't stand the fact that someone was attacking them from behind. "You're courting death." Tang Yuyu stood in the distance, her beautiful eyes almost spitting fire. She hadn't expected that Nye Tian would still be able to avoid her fatal blow. To her, this was the greatest humiliation in her career as an assassin. It was unforgivable. Crow Feather Blade. With a shout, a pair of black wings appeared on Tang Yuyu's back. With a shake of the wings, 2 black feather blades shot out like arrows piercing through the air. The black feather blades were sharp and cold, like arrows released from a bow. The sudden display of power seemed to be able to destroy everything. "It's this move again." Nye Tian's heart skipped a beat. He was very familiar with this martial technique. It was the same one Tang Yuyu had used when she ambushed him. "Come out!" Ju Wan and Ju Qian roared at the same time, not sensing the danger. 2 black feather blades flew past, leaving 2 lines of blood in the air. The heads of the Ju brothers fell to the ground. This scene made everyone suck in a breath of cold air. Ju Wan and Ju Qian were both at the 5th tier of the Wanxiang realm. Although they weren't top-notch, they could still intimidate a group. They didn't expect that the two would be like lambs to the slaughter in front of Tang Yuyu. Qiu Shan, take everyone away! Nie Tian knew how powerful his opponents were, so he growled. Nie Tian guessed that Tang Yuyu's battle prowess was definitely comparable to Qin Yetian's, or even higher. If the others stayed, not only would they not be able to help him, but they would also become a burden to him. Chapter 108. Big Brother Nie Tian. Nie Yuro was obviously unwilling to leave and shouted. Nie Tian ignored her and shouted to Zhang Yifeng, Zhang Yifeng, protect her. Zhang Yifeng was a 3rd-tier alchemist but also had the strength of a 9th-level origin spirit. His true battle strength was above Qiu Shan's. Yes. Zhang Yifeng answered and nodded heavily. Even if he died, he must do what Nie Tian ordered. Jean de Bao also realized that there was no point in staying and could only leave first. Tang Yuyu maintained a distance of several hundred meters from Nie Tian and the others, so even Jean de Bao's divine demon blood scroll did not discover her presence. Qiu Shan, Zhang Yifeng, Jean de Bao, Qiu Ling and Nie Yuro left quickly. Luckily, Tang Yuyu was not interested in them and let them leave. Tang 13 chose to stay. He had a strange feeling in his heart that the assassin in the dark made him feel an inexplicable fear. Nie Tian knew Tang 13's strength, so he allowed him to stay. Nie Tian. After Qiu Shan and the others left, Tang Yuyu's figure appeared for the first time. Her whole body was hidden in a black robe, and she emitted a cold, killing intent. She was about 100 meters away from Nie Tian and Tang 13. The moment she saw Tang Yuyu, Tang 13's eyes flashed and her heart felt an inexplicable fear. Tang Yuyu's gaze swept past Tang 13. Although there was a strange and familiar feeling, she did not care. Nie Tianling looked at Tang Yuyu coldly and said, "The one who attacked me at the freshman martial gathering was you, right?" Nie Tian was a little surprised. He did not think that the assassin who attacked him would be a woman, and so young at that. Although Nie Tian could not see Tang Yuyu's face, judging from her voice, she should be a teenage girl. A martial artist at the 9th level of the all-creation realm in his teens. This kind of martial talent was truly astonishing. Tang Yuyu's black robe trembled as she raised her head slightly and said, "Nie Tian, you actually escaped from me twice. I want to see how strong you are. My strength is enough to kill you." Nie Tian looked at Tang Yuyu from afar. The heaven and earth spiritual energy around his body began to become active. Tang Yuyu had made a move against Nie Tian twice, and they were both fatal moves. Nie Tian naturally would not allow such a person to live. In order to kill Tang Yuyu, Nie Tian only had one choice, which was to use the 3 seals of the divine god of battle. This time, Nie Tian was not going to use the flowing killing seal, but the annihilation earth seal. Among the 3 imprints of victory, the soul-extinguishing heavenly seal was the strongest, followed by the annihilation earth seal and the flowing life seal. The flowing human killing seal had once allowed Nie Tian to defeat Ba Ziang, who was at the 4th level origin spirit realm, when he was still an essence meridian martial artist. The power of the annihilation earth seal was even more terrifying than the flowing human seal. It was more than enough to kill Tang Yuyu. Arrogant! With a sneer, Tang Yuyu's expression turned cold. It was as if his entire body was covered with a layer of ice that wouldn't melt for 1,000 years. Tang 13 looked at Tang Yuyu and frowned. She seemed to be thinking about something. Dark feather explosion. However, it was obvious that Tang Yuyu would not give Nie Tian and Tang 13 time to think. With a shout, a pair of black wings appeared on his back. The black wings were formed by thousands of floating black feather blades. They were almost illusory and emitted an extremely murderous aura. In the next moment, the black wings suddenly separated from Tang Yuyu's body and flew into the air. Swoosh! 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 Countless whistling sounds pierced through the air as countless black feather blades appeared in the air. It was as if thousands of arrows were being shot at the same time. The black feather blades covered the sky and the earth, as if they could destroy the heaven and earth in the next moment. What a powerful martial technique! Feeling the enormous aura of the dark feather explosion, Nietion's heart sank and he was slightly shocked. A martial technique of this scale was enough to destroy an army in an instant. Protect yourself! Nietion glanced at Tang 13 and formed a hand seal with his hand. His body emitted an endless amount of energy. In an instant, the power of heaven and earth changed. In the surrounding 100 meters, all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth gathered towards Nietion. Tang 13 looked at Nietion in shock. She was so shocked that she couldn't speak. Annihilation Earth Seal. Open! Nietion roared. A horrifying aura erupted from his body as he raised his palms slightly. Rumble! Following the rise of Nietion's palms, the earth seemed to be pulled by a powerful force. The entire piece of earth was lifted up. It was a full 10 meters in radius, like a horrifying little mountain. This! Tang Yuyu looked at the floating little mountain in the air, and was stunned. She never thought that Nietion, who was only at the 5th level origin spirit realm, could actually release such a horrifying power. Countless black feather blades landed on the little mountain in the air, but were unable to break through the thick layer of earth. Die! Nietionling smiled coldly. His rumbling voice was like the final judgment. He flipped his hands and the whole little mountain was like a heavy shot put, smashing towards Tang Yuyu. Tang Yuyu's eyes revealed a look of fear. If she was hit by this little mountain, just this kind of pure power would be very hard to bear. She wanted to escape, but it was already too late. Dragon Crow Night Slash. In the moment of danger, Tang Yuyu's body trembled. 9 pairs of black wings suddenly appeared on her back. The 9 pairs of black wings flapped in unison. The sudden eruption of power converged into a violent and vigorous force. Rumble! In the next moment, the little mountain smashed down. The surrounding earth trembled and dust rose up to a few meters in all directions. Dust filled the sky and sand and stones flew everywhere. After a long time, the dust finally dispersed. Nietion's face was as pale as paper. Forcefully using the Annihilation Earth Seal almost instantly exhausted all of his essence energy. But he didn't care. He walked over, wanting to confirm whether Tang Yuyu was dead or alive. Is he dead? Tang 13 followed closely with a face of astonishment. Nietion's strength was too strong, far exceeding her imagination. Nietion looked at the little mountain in front of him and shook his head slightly. He wasn't sure whether Tang Yuyu was still alive or not. Bam! At this moment, a crack suddenly appeared on the little mountain. A figure flew out from it and leaped dozens of meters into the air. It was Tang Yuyu. Tang Yuyu escaped from death. Her black robe was torn and her face was covered in dust. She looked very embarrassed. Behind her, the 9 pairs of black wings slightly trembled, keeping her in the air. A strange creature that looked like a crow but had 4 dragon claws floated behind her. 9-winged dragon crow. Nietion was shocked when he saw Tang Yuyu's original spirit. So Tang Yuyu's original spirit was a 9-winged dragon crow. No wonder she could escape from Nietion's Annihilation Earth Seal. The 9-winged dragon crow was a rank 7 original spirit. Even though Tang Yuyu borrowed the power of her original spirit to escape death, she was clearly injured. Blood was forced out of the corner of her mouth. Her body was like a leaf in the wind, on the verge of collapse. Nietion. Tang Yuyu looked at Nietion with endless anger and shock in her eyes. She said, I will remember you. We will meet again. Finishing, the black wings on Tang Yuyu's back flapped. Like a stream of light, she disappeared in the blink of an eye. Nietion didn't chase because he couldn't catch up. The biggest advantage of a bird's original spirit was the ability to fly. This was an ability that other original spirit martial artists couldn't compare to. For other martial artists to fly in the air, They had to at least reach the true element realm or cultivate a flying martial skill. Chapter 109. Forcefully borrowing the power of heaven and earth to use the Annihilation Earth Seal. Nie Tian was currently extremely weak. Beside Nie Tian, Tang 13 stared at the direction where Tang Yuyu disappeared, dumbfounded for a moment. At the moment when Tang Yuyu broke through the ground, Tang 13 discovered that her heart pendant had lit up. Heart pendant, both pendants were of the same heart. Now that the heart pendant had lit up, it could only mean one thing. I met another pendant. Could she be? Tang 13's expression turned sluggish as she mumbled to herself. Tang 13, what's wrong? Seeing the strange expression on Tang 13's face, Nie Tian asked. Nie Tian, I still have something to do, I'll take my leave first. Tang 13 reacted and didn't bother explaining anything to Nie Tian. She immediately sprinted towards the direction where Tang Yuyu disappeared. Looking at Tang 13's figure, Nie Tian was slightly startled as he mumbled, could it be that Tang 13 knows this assassin? It wasn't that Nie Tian suspected Tang 13, but he subconsciously felt that she and Tang Yuyu should have a deep relationship. Nine-winged dragon Crow Yuanling, this female assassin's talent is not below MOU's. I have to be more careful in the future. Nie Tian mumbled to himself. Being stared at by a top-notch assassin like Tang Yuyu was definitely not a good thing. However, Nie Tian naturally wasn't afraid. As long as he had the time, he would immediately inscribe an astral soul. At that time, with an astral soul, he would have many ways to protect his life. He wouldn't have to use the 3 seals of the war god again. The current Nie Tian was still too weak. Although using the Annihilation Earth Seal wouldn't injure him, it would exhaust all of his elemental energy. If Tang Yuyu had other helpers, it would be very difficult for him to escape. Nie Tian didn't waste any more time. He simply dealt with the corpses of the Zhu Wan and Zhu Qian brothers and looted their belongings. These 2 brothers definitely wouldn't have dreamt that they would suffer such an undeserved calamity just because they were a temporary bodyguard. The Zhu clan brothers had quite a few good items on them. They were accumulated in the black market for many years. This time, it was Nie Tian's turn. Nie Tian took care of everything and left immediately. Inside the Dan Hart Pavilion, Gu Yi looked at Nie Tian's back from afar with a lifeless expression. He had seen everything that had happened just now. Originally, he thought that Nie Tian was just a young master of a big family, relying on the rich resources of his family, so he had some knowledge. Now that he saw the battle between Nie Tian and Tang Yuyu, Gu Yi knew that Nie Tian was absolutely a martial arts genius. He was simply a monstrous existence. Just as Nie Tian left, Qiu Shan and the others had just left the black market. Walking out of the black market, Qiu Shan finally heaved a sigh of relief. Everyone was panting heavily from exhaustion. Uncle Qiu Shan, will big brother Nie Tian be all right? Nie Yuro asked Qiu Shan with a worried expression. Miss Yuro, don't worry. Mr. Nie will definitely be fine. Qiu Shan comforted Nie Yuro. Although he said that, Qiu Shan was very worried about Nie Tian. Just now, he had already felt the power of the hidden assassins. Even if it was Nie Tian, it would be difficult for him to escape. Teacher, you must be all right. Zhang Yifeng had a complicated expression, cold sweat dripping down his face. If something happened to Nie Tian, then Lan Bingshuan's life would also be in danger. Uncle Qiu Shan, why don't we go back and take a look? Jean de Bao was the most impatient and turned to leave. Qiu Shan pulled Jean de Bao back and said, Young Master Jean, Mr. Nie asked us to leave so that we won't be a burden to him. If he is all right, he will definitely come and find us. If something happens to him, even if we go back, it will be useless. Jean de Bao, just stay here and don't cause any more trouble. Qiu Ling was also very anxious and scolded. At this moment, a gloomy voice suddenly sounded. Rather than worrying about others, why don't you worry about yourselves? The voice was low and emitted a gloomy aura, like a demon that had walked out of the abyss. As the voice fell, more than 10 black figures appeared. The person who spoke was the leader of the group. "Who is it?" Qiu Shan subconsciously looked over and his heart jumped to his throat. Qiu Shan couldn't see through the strength of the dozen or so men in black in front of him. Especially the leader of the group. His aura was especially strong and he emitted a strong killing intent. "Who is it?" The leader of the group chuckled and said coldly, "The people who want your lives. Attack." The leader of the group growled and the dozen or so subordinates behind him all stepped forward. "How dare you? How dare you injure people in Wu City? Do you know who I am?" Zhang Yifeng took a step forward and shouted angrily. After leaving the black market, they were already in Wu City. Logically speaking, Wu City was an important place in the Imperial City and should be guarded by the Imperial Guards. Why did so many black-clothed people suddenly appear? The group of black-clothed people seemed to recognize Zhang Yifeng and were very afraid of him. They were stunned and actually subconsciously retreated. The leader of the black-clothed people laughed and said, "Don't hurt this person. Take the little girl away." Nyeyuro. The target of these black-clothed people was Nyeyuro. "Don't even think about it." Zhang Yifeng remembered Nye Tian's warning and immediately stood in front of Nyeyuro. Nyeyuro was Nye Tian's sister and was very important to Nye Tian. Even if Zhang Yifeng died, he would not take a step back. "Master Zhang, we are only following orders. Why do you have to do this?" The leader of the black-clothed people smiled coldly and raised his arm. A thorny vine shot out and directly hit Zhang Yifeng. Pung! Zhang Yifeng was hit in the chest and flew back a few meters. When he landed, he immediately fainted. The black-clothed people obviously didn't dare to kill Zhang Yifeng and only knocked him out. Zhang Yifeng was a third-rank alchemist and had a high status in the Blue Cloud Empire. Most importantly, he was a member of the Alchemist Guild. If a Tier 3 alchemist died for no apparent reason, the Alchemist Association would definitely not take it lying down. Who knows, it might even alarm the Alchemist Association of the next level, and by then, the entire Blue Cloud Empire would be implicated. "Master Zhang!" Jean de Bao shouted, but Zhang Yifeng didn't respond. "Ling take Miss Yuro away." Seeing that the situation was not good, Qiu Shan shouted and stood in front of Nyeyuro. The leader of the black-clothed people looked at Qiu Shan coldly. His eyes were filled with a cold, murderous intent. He spat out a few words, "Mere and die." Pooh! In the next moment, the leader of the black-clothed people attacked. The thorny vine pierced through Qiu Shan's chest, and blood immediately flowed out. Although Qiu Shan was at the first tier of the All Creations realm, his Yuan meridians were injured and he couldn't unleash his true strength. In front of the black-clothed people, Qiu Shan couldn't resist at all. "Uncle Qiu Shan!" Seeing that Qiu Shan was injured, Qiu Ling shouted and went forward to support him. "Uncle Qiu Shan!" Nyeyuro was still young. She was so scared that she cried and held Qiu Ling-er's hand tightly. Chapter 110. You're courting death. Facing Jean de Bao's attack, the leader of the men in black didn't even look at it. Bang! With a muffled sound, Jean de Bao rolled like a rubber ball. After landing on the ground, he was actually unharmed. "Oh!" The leader of the men in black came to his senses and chuckled. "I almost forgot that you're wearing the Golden Thunder armor." The Golden Thunder armor was the 4th grade armor that Jean de Bao won from the Qin family. It was strong enough to defend against the attacks of a giant Soul Realm martial artist. Thinking of the Golden Thunder armor, the leader of the men in black suddenly became irritable. His black robe fluttered in the wind, and the space around him began to twist. His terrifying anger spread. "Jean de Bao, a piece of trash like you doesn't deserve to wear the Golden Thunder armor. Take it off." With a shrill cry, the leader of the men in black unleashed a terrifying aura. Jean de Bao felt an invisible force pressing down on his body. Drenched in sweat, he collapsed to the ground in a few seconds, unconscious. The leader of the men in black stretched out his hand, and an invisible force tore the golden thunder armor off Jean de Bayo's body. Several cuts appeared on Jean de Bayo's body, and blood flowed all over his body. Jean de Bayo. Chiu Ling was young and had never experienced such a situation. She also burst into tears. "You big jerk! If you dare to hurt us, Big Brother Nye Tian will not let you go." Nye Yuro suddenly displayed a bravery that didn't match her age. She stepped forward and shouted. The leader of the men in black was not scared by Nye Yuro. Instead, he chuckled. "Little girl, I'm afraid that your Big Brother Nye Tian is already a corpse." "You're lying. Big Brother Nye Tian is invincible. He will not die." Nye Yuro shouted, but tears flowed down her cheeks. The leader of the men in black did not want to waste any more time. He said coldly, "Take her away." "Yes." A dozen of his men replied in unison. One of the men in black reacted quickly and attacked Nye Yuro with his spiritual snake sword. Chiu Ling reacted and struck out with her spirit snake illusory sword. Sword chi gushed out. But the man in black was much stronger than her. With a wave of his hand, all her sword attacks were shattered. Chiu Ling screamed and fell to the ground. She fainted again. Big Sister Ling Nye Yuro was so scared that she started crying. She wanted to run over, but she was stopped by another black-clothed man. "Brother Nye Tian, where are you? Hurry up and save Ro." Nye Yuro cried as she tried to help. The small fist swung out, but it was only halfway through before it was bounced back by the black-clothed man's firm and fierce aura, causing it to fall to the ground. "Little sister, come with us obediently." The black-robed man chuckled, reaching out to lift Nye Yuro up. "Yeah." At that moment a strange cry was heard. A black and white figure suddenly dashed out and bit the black-clothed man's wrist. "Caw!" With a crisp sound, the black-clothed man's wrist was bitten off. Crack! 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 In the next moment a strange scene appeared. A layer of ice crystals formed on the black-clothed man's body, and he was actually directly frozen. "What's that?" The others looked at the chubby little bear that suddenly appeared and exclaimed in unison. "Xiao Guai!" When Nye Yuro saw that it was Xiao Guai, she shouted out in surprise. Xiao Guai leaped onto Nye Yuro's shoulder and rubbed its chubby head against Nye Yuro's neck, seemingly comforting the latter. "Little bastard, I will kill you!" The leader of the black-clothed men didn't want to waste any more time, and he personally made a move. Vines formed into a ghost claw and grabbed towards Xiao Guai. The little Xiao waved its furry claw, and layers of ice crystals formed in the air, protecting it and Nye Yuro in the center. Bang! The vines crashed onto the ice crystal barrier, and with a loud bang, the ice crystal barrier immediately shattered. The little Xiao was, after all, too small. Even though it had terrifying talent, it was still too weak. Roar! The ice crystal barrier shattered, and Xiao Guai let out a miserable cry. Its body tilted and fell into Nye Yuro's arms. "Xiao Guai!" Nye Yuro cried out in fear, and in the next moment she also fainted onto the ground. The leader of the black-clothed men didn't hesitate, and he immediately took out a sack, placed Nye Yuro into the sack, and threw it to one of his subordinates. "Leader, what should we do with these people?" one of the black-clothed men asked. "Wu San stays. Except for Zhang Yifeng, kill everyone else, don't leave any corpses," the leader of the black-clothed men said, and turned around to leave. "Yes." The black-clothed man named Wu San glanced at the unconscious Chiu Ling and laughed. In the blink of an eye, all the black-clothed men had left, and only Wu San was left behind. "Little beauty, you are going to die anyway, let me have a good time before you die." Wu San laughed, and his saliva almost flowed out. Wu San took a few steps forward, and directly tore Chiu Ling-er's clothes, immediately revealing a large piece of white skin, and the graceful figure of a young girl, faintly discernible. Immediately Wu San felt the evil fire in his heart, and it was difficult to suppress it. At this moment, a figure suddenly sprang up from behind, and suddenly hugged Wu San, and a dagger slashed across Wu San's neck. Wu San felt a chill on his neck, and he felt a warm, sticky liquid spurting out. Subconsciously, he covered his neck, but could not stop the blood from spurting out. Die. Piece of sh*t. Jean de Bao directly pushed Wu San to the ground. After the latter fell to the ground, he twitched a few times and then stopped moving. Although Jean de Bao had fainted just now, his demon and God's blood scroll spirit was very miraculous, and it allowed him to quickly recover. In just a few moments, the bloody wounds on his body had faded a lot. In any case, Wu San was an all-creations martial artist, and yet he was so easily killed by Jean de Bao. He could only blame himself for letting his guard down. Jean de Bao took off the only shirt he had on, and draped it over Chiu Ling-er, and then he woke her up. When Chiu Ling-er woke up, she saw Wu San's corpse, and then looked at her own clothes. She immediately understood what had happened, and immediately burst into tears. Ling-er, he didn't do anything. I killed him. Jean de Bao did not know what to say, and could only stiffly comfort her. De Bao. Chiu Ling-er threw herself into Jean de Bao's arms, and cried even more sadly. After a while, Chiu Ling-er finally stopped crying, and wiped away her tears. Her emotions were much calmer now. The two of them looked at each other, but did not know what to do next. Nie Yuro had been taken away. If Nie Tian found out about this, it would be disastrous. At this moment, a figure running wildly appeared in the distance. Nie Tian was still 100 meters away, but he had already sensed that something was wrong. With a loud roar, he rushed forward and arrived in the blink of an eye. What happened? Seeing Zhang Yifeng and Qiu Shan unconscious on the ground, and Nie Yuro nowhere to be seen, Nie Tian's heart sank, and he roared angrily. Jean de Bao briefly explained what had happened. After hearing this, Nie Tian's body stiffened, and he instantly felt his blood flow backward. His eyes were bloodshot, and he could only inhale, but not exhale. His entire person was like a volcano that had suddenly boiled, and was about to explode. Anger, monstrous anger! You must find Yuro! After a while, Nie Tian roared angrily, and his entire body released a terrifying murderous intent. Chapter 111. Nie Yuro was Nie Tian's most important family member in this life. He would not allow anything to happen to her. Boss, what do we do now? Jean de Bao asked anxiously. Nie Tian did not speak. He walked to Qiu Shan's side and fed him a blood yuan pill. At this time, Zhang Yifeng also slowly woke up. Seeing that Nie Tian had returned, Zhang Yifeng knelt down with a thud and said sorrowfully, "Teacher, this disciple is useless and could not protect Miss Yuro. This disciple is willing to die as an apology." "No one will die," Nie Tian said solemnly and motioned for Zhang Yifeng to stand up. Now that things had come to this, Nie Tian didn't want to blame anyone. The most important thing now was to find the men in black and rescue Nie Yuro. "Teacher, these people know me, so they must be from the Blue Cloud Empire. And they don't look like people from the Bloodbat sect." Zhang Yifeng thought for a moment and reminded. "Yes." Jean de Bao added, "The leader of the men in black also knows me, and he even stole my golden thunder battle armor. They must be from the Qin family. I will ask my father to find the Qin family." Nie Tian nodded slightly, already having a guess in his heart. Nie Tian believed that the people who kidnapped Nie Yuro must be Lan Binji's subordinates. Although he had only met Lan Binji a few times, Nie Tian could tell at a glance that the latter was a vengeful and merciless person. Nie Tian even guessed that Tang Yuyu was sent by Lan Binji to kill him. "Lan Binji, I will definitely make you pay." Nie Tian's face was gloomy as he growled in his heart. "Yifeng, I want to see the Emperor of Blue Cloud Empire," Nie Tian said decisively. At this time, even if Nie Tian concluded that Lan Binji was behind this, he could not directly fight the latter to the death. And with Lan Binji's temperament, if Nie Tian pushed him too far, he would definitely destroy Nie Yuro's corpse. At the end of the day, Nie Tian's current strength was too weak. It was impossible for him to fight against the entire kingdom of Blue Cloud alone. Teacher, His Majesty the Emperor is of noble status. It's not that easy to meet him. Zhang Yifeng's expression was troubled. Nie Tian thought for a moment and said, "Let's go see Lan Bingqian first." Since he couldn't see the emperor, Nie Tian could only take a step back and see Lan Bingqian. Without further ado, they quickly left Wu City. Nie Tian asked Jean de Bao to bring Qiu Shan and Qiu Linger back first, while he and Zhang Yifeng went to the Crown Prince's residence together. A moment later, in the Crown Prince's residence. Lan Bingqian, I'll give you a chance. Take me to the Emperor. Go now. Nie Tian didn't want to talk nonsense with Lan Bingqian and said directly, almost in a commanding tone. Mr. Nie, what's going on? Imperial Father is very busy. I'm afraid he won't see you easily. Lan Bingqian put on a tactful attitude. Clearly, he was still holding a grudge against Nie Tian for refusing to treat Lan Bingqian. Your Highness, my teacher's sister has been kidnapped. I hope you can take my teacher to His Majesty the Emperor. Zhang Yifeng said. Nie Tianling looked at Lan Bingqian coldly and said, I'll only give you one chance. Just tell me if you can or can't. Lan Bingqian didn't expect Nie Tian to be so overbearing in this situation. His forehead immediately broke out in cold sweat. It was only for a short moment, but Lan Bingqian saw the determination in Nie Tian's eyes. He suddenly felt a shiver from the depths of his soul. All right. I'll take Mr. Nie to see Imperial Father right now. Lan Bingqian agreed without much hesitation. He didn't dare to refuse Nie Tian. He didn't even dare to negotiate with Nie Tian. The three of them didn't waste any time and left the Crown Prince's residence for the Imperial Palace. Just as Nie Tian and the others left the Crown Prince's residence, at the same time, in the Qin residence. In the meeting hall, Lan Bingji sat on the main seat. In front of him stood two people. One was Qin Yetian, the other was a young man dressed in black. Cousin, you did well. I'll definitely reward you later. Lan Bingji smiled proudly. His smile was very happy and brilliant. Thank you, Your Highness. The young man in black bowed and replied. This man in black was none other than the leader of the men in black who had kidnapped Nyeyuro. Although his voice had changed, his figure and aura couldn't be changed. He was called Qin Yulong, the eldest son of Qin Yetian. At the same time, he was the elder brother of Qin Yuhu and Qin Yulong. Qin Yetian was the commander of the Imperial Guards. Qin Yulong was the captain of one of the 8 Imperial Guards. The men who had attacked Nyeyuro were Qin Yulong and his men. They were under Lan Bingji's orders. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to openly kidnap people in Wu City. Lan Bingji had promised Qin Yulong that as long as he became the emperor, Qin Yulong would be the next commander of the Imperial Guards. Qin Yetian looked at the complacent Lan Bingji. However, a hint of worry appeared on his face. He bowed and said, Your Highness, Nie Tian's identity is extraordinary. Although he doesn't have a high status, he is Zhang Yifeng's teacher. Moreover, he has a close relationship with Qi Feng from Tyrant Cloud Academy. In addition, he is Tyrant Cloud's rookie king. Even Principal Wakaba thinks highly of him. If he finds out about this, I'm afraid he won't rest until he's dead. Lan Bingji took a sip of tea and laughed wildly. He said, Uncle, you don't have to worry. If this prince's guess is correct, Nie Tian is already a corpse. Lan Bingji knew that Nie Tian and the others had gone to the black market. Therefore, he concluded that Nie Tian was already dead. Tang Yuyu was a top-notch assassin. He definitely wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity. Moreover, if Tang Yuyu made a move again, he wouldn't have to worry too much in the black market. There was absolutely no possibility of him failing. What a pity! Lan Bingji suddenly smiled regretfully. He said, Nie Tian died too early. He couldn't see his younger sister's tragic end. This prince will not only make his younger sister's life a living hell, but I will also make his family pay the price. I want everyone in the world to know that those who offend me, Lan Binji, will definitely not have a good ending. Your Highness is wise. Qin Yetian looked at Lan Binji. His heart inexplicably trembled. He found it hard to believe that the person in front of him was actually a 14-year-old youth. Your Highness, how should we deal with that little girl? Qin Yetian bowed and asked. He now knew that Lan Binji was someone he couldn't afford to offend. Lan Binji yawned lazily and laughed. He said, I heard that third cousin has some unusual hobbies. Let third cousin play with that little girl for a few days. If third cousin gets tired of playing with her, just sell her. The third cousin that Lan Binji mentioned was Qin Yulong. Qin Yulong was indeed a 100% pervert in the past. Unfortunately, he had already been castrated by Nie Tian. Yes. I thank your Highness on behalf of Yulong. When Qin Yetian heard Lan Binji speak of Qin Yulong in such a manner, he felt very upset. However, he could only nod and express his thanks. All right, this prince will be leaving. Lan Binji waved his hand casually. He slowly stood up and left. When he reached the entrance of the hall, Lan Binji suddenly turned around and said with a serious expression, Commander Qin, this prince has never appeared here today. Do you understand? Qin Yetian was stunned for a moment. He immediately reacted. Lan Binji wanted to distance himself from this matter. This subordinate understands. Although he knew what Lan Binji meant, Qin Yetian could only nod solemnly. Chapter 112. Nie Tian and Zhang Yifeng followed Lan Bingchen and rushed to the Imperial Palace. The Imperial Palace was the most heavily guarded place in Blue Cloud City, the center of the highest power in the Blue Cloud Empire. Outside the palace gate, a row of armored warriors stood motionless with their heads held high. Each of them was at least in the 5th tier of the All Creations realm. Lan Bingchen walked in front. The warriors saluted and opened the palace gate. After walking into the palace, Nie Tian couldn't help but smile bitterly. If Lan Bingchen hadn't led the way today, he wouldn't even have been able to enter the palace gate. The defense of the palace was extremely tight. In addition to the palace guards on the surface, there were countless secret guards protecting the palace day and night. However, such guards were only used to guard against ordinary warriors. If they encountered a true energy realm or even a spirit wheel realm expert, the defense of the palace would be useless to them. With Lan Bingchen leading the way, Nie Tian and the others had a smooth journey and soon arrived at the Zhengde Hall of the palace. A figure flashed out of the Zhengde Hall. It was none other than Xiao Luyang. Master Xiao. Lan Bingchen and Zhang Yifeng greeted him at the same time and bowed slightly. Xiao Luyang walked over and cast a sideways glance at Nie Tian, his face full of impatience. Master Xiao, is father here? Mr. Nie wants to see father, Lan Bingchen said respectfully. Xiao Luyang looked at Nie Tian playfully and joked, You want to see His Majesty? Yes. Nie Tian didn't want to talk nonsense and nodded slightly. Humph. Xiao Luyang sneered and said indifferently, His Majesty has just fallen asleep and won't see anyone. Please go back. Obviously, Xiao Luyang was still brooding over what happened before. Now that he had a chance to ridicule Nie Tian, he certainly wouldn't let it go. Nie Tian really didn't have time to argue with Xiao Luyang. After thinking for a moment, he said, The black spots on the princess' body are concentrated in the lower abdomen. The black spots are sunken, and there is a blood spot in the center that has begun to fester. The strange words made Xiao Luyang's whole body shake, as if he had been electrocuted. How did you know? Xiao Luyang froze for a moment, bean-sized beads of sweat dripping from his forehead, and suddenly shouted. The princess's current condition was exactly the same as what Nie Tian had described. However, only Xiao Luyang knew about it. Even the emperor didn't know about it, so how could Nie Tian know it so clearly? If the princess is not treated within an hour, she will definitely die. If you don't want the princess to die, then get the hell out of my way, Nie Tian said in a low voice. His extremely cold eyes revealed a strong sense of confidence. Get lost. As soon as Nie Tian's voice fell, the scene fell into a dead silence. It was hard to imagine that Nie Tian would actually reprimand Xiao Luyang in front of him. In fact, Nie Tian was just spouting nonsense from his heart. He was only speculating about Lan Bingshuan's current situation based on her 10,000 poison bodies characteristic. In fact, the poison spots on Lan Bingshuan's body weren't fatal. On the contrary, they were beneficial to her body. Once the poison spots were expelled, Lan Bingxian would be fine. However, only Nie Tian knew about this. Xiao Luyang didn't know about it. Xiao Luyang gritted his teeth. He didn't expect that he would be reprimanded by a teenager in front of him. Nie Tian ignored Xiao Luyang's anger and said in a cold voice, "Your face is for me to slap. You can continue to be angry if you really don't care about the princess's life or death." Xiao Luyang's eyes viciously stared at Nie Tian. His whole body trembled violently. As the president of the Alchemist Guild, Xiao Luyang's status was very high. Usually, even the emperor would treat him as an equal and even give him some courtesy. But now, he was reprimanded by a teenager in front of him. He couldn't swallow this anger. But what could he do even if he couldn't swallow it? Nie Tian had already grasped Xiao Luyang's vital point. He could only obediently give in. Relying on his remaining reason, Xiao Luyang forced himself to calm down and said, "I'll take you to see His Majesty the Emperor." After that, Xiao Luyang flicked his sleeves and turned around, walking towards the Righteous Virtue Hall. Nie Tian heaved a long sigh of relief. If Xiao Luyang continued to be in a stalemate with him, he really didn't know what to do. A moment later, Nie Tian and the other two walked into the Righteous Virtue Hall. In the hall, on a spacious dragon bed, a burly middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s was lying down. His temperament was languid and his mood was low, giving people a feeling of a dying tree. Nie Tian knew that this middle-aged man was the Emperor of the Blue Cloud Empire, the real ruler of the Blue Cloud Empire. "This child greets Imperial Father." Lan Bingchen bowed deeply and respectfully. "Dispense with the formalities." Lan Yunhai slightly waved his hand and said a few words in a very low voice. Xiao Luyang, who was sitting next to Lan Yunhai, whispered a few words to him. Lan Yunhai slowly stood up and looked at Nie Tian with listless eyes. He reluctantly squeezed out a smile and said, "You are Master Zhang's teacher, Mr. Nie Tian?" Although Lan Yunhai hadn't seen Nie Tian before, he had heard of his name. Zhang Yifeng's teacher, the newcomer king of Tyrant Cloud Academy, defeated Lan Binji, and even fought against Qin Yetian. These things were enough for Lan Yunhai to pay attention to the young man in front of him. Nie Tian nodded and said directly, "I can save the princess, but your majesty must save my sister first. Mr. Nie." Lan Yunhai suddenly raised his voice. His originally weak body suddenly exploded with a tyrannical aura, pressing down on Nie Tian. At the same time, he said in a loud voice, "Are you negotiating with me?" Nie Tian didn't fear Lan Yunhai's pressure at all. He straightened his chest and his eyes became more resolute. He said coldly, "I am negotiating with you, and you must agree to my conditions." As soon as he finished speaking, the entire hall fell into a deathly silence, to the point that even a pin drop could be heard. Lan Yunhai's expression stiffened. He looked at Nie Tian from afar and his heart skipped a beat. This young man's eyes are so scary. He doesn't show any fear in front of my pressure. Nie Tian made Lan Yunhai think of a phrase, "Hidden dragon." The hidden dragon rises from the abyss with the power to break the heavens. This was how Lan Yunhai felt about Nie Tian. However, Lan Yunhai was the ruler of a country after all. He quickly returned to normal and said coldly, "What if I don't agree to your conditions?" Nie Tian's pupils shrank, and his eyes released undisguised anger. He said coldly, "If you reject me, the kingdom of blue clouds will be destroyed." Zhang Yifeng and Lan Bingchen were completely stunned by his words. What arrogance! presumptuous, arrogant, boundless, crazy enough to make one's hair stand on end. The scene was dead silent. It was as if time had stopped, and the atmosphere was so oppressive that it was suffocating. What an arrogant young man! After a long while, Xiao Luyang pointed at Nie Tian and roared angrily, "How dare you say such treasonous words? You're courting death." Nie Tianling looked at Xiao Luyang coldly and ignored him. He stared at Lan Yunhai and said word by word, "My conditions, do you agree to them or not?" Nie Tian was not joking. If something really happened to Nieyuro, he would bury the entire royal family of Blue Clouds. The fate of the royal family of Blue Clouds was in Lan Yunhai's hands. If he chose correctly, he would live. If he chose wrongly, he would fall into a bottomless abyss. Lan Yunhai stared at Nie Tian with his eagle-like eyes. He wanted to know what made this young man so fearless. Chapter 113. Lan Yunhai smiled. This meant that he had given in. In the end, Nie Tian won this psychological battle. Nie Tian and Lan Yunhai were playing a psychological game. Whoever could endure it would be the winner. Of course, Nie Tian's persistence was based on his confidence in himself. If Lan Yunhai had rejected him, the royal family of Blue Cloud would have faced an unprecedented calamity. Xiao Luyang was dumbfounded. He never thought that the emperor would accept Nie Tian's threat. "Good. Mr. Nie, I agree to your conditions." Lan Yunhai put away his awkward smile and said coldly, "But I hope that Mr. Nie will fulfill his promise." Nie Tian nodded and said calmly, "If I can't cure the princess, I will die with her." "Good." Lan Yunhai laughed. "Mr. Nie is indeed straightforward. I admire you." After that, Nie Tian briefly explained what had happened to him. Lan Yunhai's expression darkened as he said, "They were kidnapped in the Wu city. Are the imperial city's imperial guards stupid? Guards, bring Qin Yetian to see me." Lan Yunhai roared, his voice resounding through the entire Righteous Virtue Hall. Lan Bingchen secretly smiled at Lan Yunhai's reaction. Lan Bingchen was not a fool. He could more or less guess that Lan Bingji had something to do with this. Based on Lan Bingchen's understanding of his brother, this was most likely Lan Bingji's plan. "Imperial Father, go ahead and be angry. The angrier you are, the better." Lan Bingchen was already laughing in his heart. If this matter really dragged Lan Bingji out, there would be a good show to watch. With Nie Tian's temperament, he would definitely not let this matter rest. At this moment, Lan Bingchen suddenly felt that Nie Tian was his benefactor. Unfortunately, Nie Tian was not willing to accept him as a disciple. Not long after, Qin Yetian's figure appeared in the Righteous Virtue Hall. When he saw Nie Tian, he was instantly dumbfounded. His head buzzed, and an ominous feeling rose in his heart. "This subject greets your majesty." Qin Yetian knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Sensing that the emperor's mood wasn't right, Qin Yetian could no longer remain calm. Lan Yunhai had been very dissatisfied with Qin Yetian for the past few days. The pill refinement master that the Qin family had invited to treat the princess not only failed to cure her illness, but also worsened her condition, causing her to be on the verge of death. Gu Sanso had already left the Blue Cloud Empire, but he had left Qin Yetian with a pile of *T. Qin Yetian. "You know Mr. Nie, right?" Lan Yunhai spoke in a low voice that carried a wisp of gloom. "Yes." Qin Yetian did not dare to raise his head to look at Lan Yunhai. He only lowered his head and answered, "Good, he has some questions for you." Lan Yunhai nodded and glanced at Nie Tian. Nie Tian naturally didn't hold back. He took a step forward and said in a cold tone, "Qin Yetian, my sister was kidnapped in Wu City. I want you to find her." Qin Yetian finally raised his head and looked at Nie Tian with a difficult expression, then said, "Mr. Nie, I have never seen your sister before. If I want to find her, I'm afraid that it won't be easy. I can only try my best. As for whether or not I can find her, that..." Qin Yetian, listen to me clearly. You don't have to try your best, You have to find her no matter what. Furthermore, I want to see that my sister is completely fine and unharmed." Without waiting for Qin Yetian to finish speaking, Lan Yunhai directly interrupted him. Qin Yetian was the commander of the Imperial Guards. How could he not know that someone was kidnapped in the Imperial Guards? If he didn't know anything, then there would be no meaning for him to be the commander of the Imperial Guards. Qin Yetian swallowed his saliva and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He bowed and replied, "Mr. Nye, don't worry, I will definitely find her within 3 days no matter the cost." 3 days? Nye Tianling sneered, stared at Qin Yetian and said word by word, "Qin Yetian, you only have half an hour's time." "Half an hour?" Qin Yetian looked at Nye Tian in astonishment and cried out in surprise. Lan Yunhai also went into a daze for a moment and said, "Mr. Nye, half an hour's time is too little." Nye Tian raised his head and looked at Lan Yunhai, then said indifferently, "Your Majesty, I believe that Master Xiao hasn't explained the princess's condition to you clearly, right?" And Lan Yunhai's expression darkened as he looked at Xiao Luyang. Xiao Luyang's expression slightly stiffened. Knowing that he couldn't hide the matter anymore, he whispered a few words to Lan Yunhai. After listening to Xiao Luyang's words, Lan Yunhai's expression darkened. After a moment of silence, his eyes suddenly emitted a bright light and he shouted furiously, "Qin Yetian, mobilize all the forces that can be mobilized, dig 3 feet into the ground, even if you have to turn Blue Cloud City upside down, you must find Mr. Nye's sister. If you can't find her within half an hour, come and see me with your head." Xiao Luyang told Lan Yunhai that Lan Bingxian had at most an hour left. If she couldn't receive treatment within an hour, she would die without a doubt. Lan Yunhai only had one daughter, and he treated her like a pearl in his palm and doted on her. It was precisely because of Lan Bingxuan's illness that Lan Yunhai's mood was depressed every day. In this current situation, if he couldn't find Nyeyuro, Nye Tian would definitely not save her. Therefore, Nyeyuro must be found within half an hour, otherwise, Lan Bingxuan's life would be in danger. When Lan Yunhai's last sentence of "come and see me with your head" fell, Qin Yetian's whole body turned sluggish, and he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. This sentence was like a thunderclap from the 9th heaven, exploding in Qin Yetian's mind. He suddenly felt dizzy and his mind was in a trance. His body swayed and he almost fell down. As the saying goes, a monarch must not joke. For Lan Yunhai to say such words at this time, it was absolutely not a joke. Qin Yetian originally wanted to report this matter to Lan Binji or the Empress, then slowly think of a way to deal with this matter. But from the looks of it now, he didn't have the time to do so. "What are you still standing there for? Quickly go and find her." Seeing that Qin Yetian was still in a daze, Lan Yunhai couldn't help but become even more furious and almost roared out, "Yes, yes, yes, I will go and find her right now." Qin Yetian nodded his head, wiped away the sweat on his forehead, and ran out of the Righteous Virtue Palace without stopping. Seeing that Qin Yetian ran out of the palace, Lan Yunhai's attitude became humble and said carefully, "Mr. Nye, Qin Yetian has already gone to find her. The princess, wait until he finds her first." Nye Tianling coldly interrupted Lan Yunhai's words, not caring about what expression Lan Yunhai had on his face. Nye Tian had to find Nyeyuro within half an hour. He had to ensure Nyeyuro's safety. And if Nyeyuro was injured or missing anything, Nye Tian definitely wouldn't let the matter rest. Lan Yunhai's eyes turned cold, and a cold glint floated past his eyes, but he didn't say anything. Zhang Yifeng accompanied Nye Tian and stood in the palace, quietly waiting for Qin Yetian's news. After Qin Yetian ran out of the palace, he returned to the Qin residence at full speed. With the emperor's supervision, Qin Yetian naturally didn't dare to be negligent. Chapter 114. Father! Qin Yulong subconsciously shouted when he saw Qin Yetian rushing over anxiously. "Take me to see Nyeyuro!" Qin Yetian bellowed angrily like a berserk beast. Qin Yulong froze for a moment and immediately said, "That little girl was taken away by third brother. She is now in third brother's room." Qin Yulong was stunned for a moment before he suddenly shouted, "Bastard! Who let him take her away?" Bing, bing, didn't His Highness Binji say that the little girl was given to third brother? Qin Yulong was quite frightened. He knew that something had happened and his tongue was tied. Qin Yetian's face was extremely gloomy and he panted heavily. Lan Binji did say that, but Qin Yetian didn't think that Qin Yulong would actually dare to do it. A castrated trash still doesn't give people peace of mind. Qin Yetian beat his chest and stamped his feet. "Father, father? Did something happen?" Qin Yulong saw that Qin Yetian's expression was abnormally panicked, so he probed. "How long has Yulong taken her away?" Qin Yetian forced himself to calm down and asked in horror. He knew his own son. Qin Yetian naturally knew Qin Yulong like the back of his hand. This son of his had no other ability but to torture little girls. Most of the teenage maids in the mansion had been abused by Qin Yulong. Many of them even died in Qin Yulong's hands. Yes, it's been half an hour." Qin Yulong suddenly shouted. "Did third brother kill that little girl?" Rumble. This sentence was like a clap of thunder that suddenly exploded in Qin Yetian's heart. He suddenly felt his 3 souls leave his body and his 7 mortal forms leave his body. His entire body swayed and he almost fell. "Father, father, are you okay?" Qin Yulong hurriedly supported Qin Yetian. Large beads of sweat rolled down his face. Without a doubt, this time the Qin family was in big trouble. "Quick, take me to Yulong's room." Qin Yetian pushed Qin Yulong away and stumbled out. If something really happened to Nyeyuro, Qin Yetian would definitely be buried with her. If he died, the entire Qin family's pillar of support would fall, and the Qin family wouldn't be far from collapsing. Qin Yetian, Qin Yulong, and his son, Qin Yetian, arrived at a unique courtyard in the inner compound. Outside the courtyard, a few young maidservants were muttering about something. "Little girl, you'd better obediently follow this young master. Otherwise, this young master will sell you to a brothel and let you be a piece of trash that thousands of men sleep on. You don't know, but those high officials and nobles like little girls like you the most." Ha 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 ha. Qin Yulong's shrill and wild laughter came from the small courtyard. Qin Yulong was no longer a man. Even his voice was sharp and ear-piercing. In the room, Nyeyuro hugged Bab tightly and curled up in a dark corner. Her eyes were wet with tears. She was clearly frightened. Qin Yulong walked over step by step. He was extremely careful, and his eyes were fixed on the little Pishio in Nyeyuro's arms. Qin Yulong had seen the power of the little Pishio. Even Gu Sanso was frozen after being bitten by the little Pishio. Qin Yulong was bitten by the little Pishio just now. Until now, half of Qin Yulong's arm was still numb, and he couldn't feel anything. Whoa! Bab bared its teeth and let out a threatening sound. It would definitely not let anyone hurt Nyeyuro. Although Bab was only a month old, it already had some intelligence. It stayed with Nyeyuro every day, and it was even more dependent on Nyetian. Nyetian was the first face that Bab saw after it was born. Spiritual beasts would instinctively treat the first face that they saw as their mother. Therefore, Bab saw Nyetian as its first master. And Nyeyuro had been with it day and night, so she was its second master. "This little thing is a little troublesome." Qin Yulong's face was slightly embarrassed. He was very afraid of Bab. Qin Yulong carefully approached Nyeyuro. He was extremely nervous. "Yulong." At this moment, a furious roar sounded out like a clap of thunder. Qin Yulong was so shocked that his body trembled, and he almost peed in his pants. When he recognized that it was Qin Yetian's voice, he heaved a sigh of relief. "Father, what's wrong?" Qin Yulong opened the door and saw Qin Yetian rushing over angrily. His heart immediately sank. Qin Yetian ignored him and directly barged into the room. When he saw that Nyeyuro was still alive, he immediately felt relieved. As long as Nyeyuro was still alive, everything would be easy. Qin Yetian walked out of the room and looked at Qin Yulong. He asked, "You didn't do anything to her, right?" "No." Qin Yulong noticed that there was something wrong with Qin Yetian's gaze. He immediately shook his head like a rattle drum. "Does she know who you are?" Qin Yetian suddenly asked. "Yes, she knows." Qin Yulong nodded subconsciously. Nyeyuro had already recognized Qin Yulong, and she also knew that she was in the Qin residence. Qin Yetian suddenly closed his eyes, as if he was thinking about something. "Yulong, don't blame father for being ruthless." Suddenly, Qin Yetian opened his eyes and suddenly struck out with his palm, heavily hitting the top of Qin Yulong's head. Bang! Qin Yulong's knees sank and the top of his head exploded. Fresh blood gushed out and he died on the spot. Before he died, Qin Yulong looked at Qin Yetian with a puzzled expression. His eyes were filled with doubt and unwillingness. He never imagined that he would die in the hands of his own father. "Father!" This scene happened to be seen by Qin Yulong, who had rushed over, and he immediately wailed. Qin Yetian brushed Qin Yulong's eyes and made him close them. His expression became somewhat dazed and sorrowful. He said in a low voice, "Yulong, in order to protect the Qin family, Yulong must die. Father has no choice but to do this." Nye Tian was not a fool. If he handed Nyeyuro over, he had to give him an explanation. Why was Nyeyuro in Qin Yulong's hands, and why was she in the Qin residence? If he could not answer these questions, Qin Yetian would still be implicated. In order to protect himself and the Qin family, Qin Yetian had to sacrifice Qin Yulong. Before Qin Yetian killed Qin Yulong, he had already thought of a way out. He would push everything onto Qin Yulong. He would say that Qin Yulong wanted to take revenge on Nye Tian, so he sent people to kidnap Nyeyuro. Of course, all the people in the Imperial Guards who were involved in this matter must die as well. Only by doing so could he hide the truth. Qin Yetian was vicious. He could even kill his own son. The death of a few Imperial Guards was of course insignificant to him. As the saying goes, even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs. Qin Yetian was even more vicious than a beast. After killing Qin Yulong, Qin Yetian quickly calmed down. He called Qin Yulong over and said in a low voice, "Gather everyone who was involved in this matter," and then Qin Yetian made a gesture to silence him. Qin Yulong immediately understood and left immediately. Qin Yetian did not delay any further. He ordered a few servant girls to bring Nyeyuro out and personally carried Qin Yulong's corpse back to the palace. Of course, he had to put on a show. Qin Yetian wanted to bring Qin Yulong's corpse back to the palace. Chapter 115. Imperial Palace, Virtue Hall. Lan Yunhai sat in the hall, waiting anxiously. If Qin Yetian came a minute late, Lan Bingxuan's life would be in danger. At this time, in the hall, besides Xiao Luyang, Nye Tian, Zhang Yifeng, and Lan Bingchen, there were two other figures, Jin Mingxin and Qi Feng. Both of them had learned of what had happened from Jin Debao and knew that Nye Tian had already arrived at the Imperial Palace, so they rushed over without stopping. Lan Yunhai was also slightly surprised. He didn't expect Nye Tian's influence to be so great that even Jin Mingxin and Qi Feng came over. The hall was deathly silent. Everyone was waiting for Qin Yetian to appear. If Qin Yetian couldn't bring Nyeyuro over, then today's Virtue Hall was bound to be a bloodbath. Nye Tian had already made up his mind. If he didn't see Nyeyuro, his next step would be to kill his way into the Binji Palace and ask Lan Binji for her. And if Lan Yunhai stopped him, Nye Tian didn't mind starting an all-out war with the imperial family. Although Nye Tian wasn't strong enough right now, Zhang Yifeng, Jin Mingxin, Qi Feng, and the others would definitely stand on his side. Therefore, he was very doubtful whether the imperial family had the courage to start an all-out war. Lan Yunhai also sensed that Nye Tian's emotions weren't right. He only hoped that Qin Yetian would bring good news. "Your Majesty, Commander Qin has returned." Qin Yetian was still several hundred meters away, but Xiao Luyang had already sensed his aura and hurriedly said to Lan Yunhai. Everyone looked out of the hall. Qin Yetian carried a corpse in his hand, and 2 servant girls followed behind him. The 2 servant girls brought a little girl with them. It was Nyeyuro, big brother Nye Tian. Nyeyuro hadn't even entered the hall when she saw Nye Tian from afar. She ran over and couldn't help but cry out. Nye Tian held Nyeyuro in his arms. When the latter had cried enough and calmed down, he carefully examined her. After confirming that Nyeyuro was all right, Nye Tian's taut face relaxed a little. When Lan Yunhai saw Qin Yetian carrying Qin Yulong's corpse in his hand, his expression turned gloomy as he asked, "Qin Yetian, what's going on?" Qin Yetian knelt on the ground and pointed at Qin Yulong's corpse. "Your Majesty, this is your subject's 3rd son, Qin Yulong. He was the one who had kidnapped Miss Nyeyuro. This subject's son is a good-for-nothing and has a bad reputation. I wanted to discipline him more strictly, but I never had the time. My son and Mr. Nye have some personal grudges, and he has always harbored hatred in his heart. That's why he did such a wrong thing. It's really heartbreaking. Your subject has failed to teach my son properly and has made a grave mistake. Your Majesty, please punish me." After Qin Yetian finished speaking, he wept bitterly and kowtowed deeply to the ground. Lan Yunhai frowned and asked, "Then how did he die?" Qin Yetian howled in pain and said, "After I found out what happened, I couldn't bear to see this child continue to commit crimes, so I hardened my heart and personally executed him." "Personally killing your own son?" Lan Yunhai raised his eyebrows and said solemnly, "Qin Yetian, I have misjudged you. I didn't expect you to be able to do such a shocking thing." Lan Yunhai's voice was cold and filled with a chill. He wasn't a 3-year-old child, so he could obviously tell that Qin Yetian was spouting nonsense. Killing Qin Yulong was obviously to silence him. Lan Yunhai knew that the mastermind behind the kidnapping of Nyeyuro was definitely someone else. Then who could it be? Who would make Qin Yetian sacrifice his own son to protect Nyeyuro? Could it be? Lan Yunhai's expression suddenly changed and a name appeared in his mind. Lan Binji. Lan Binji was Qin Yetian's nephew and had always been close to the Qin family. Thinking about how Lan Binji had just lost to Nye Tian in the Tyrant Cloud Freshman Martial Meet, Lan Yunhai guessed that the whole thing was most likely planned by Lan Binji. Lan Yunhai suddenly looked at Nye Tian strangely and was shocked to discover the killing intent in the latter's eyes. His heart shivered and he sighed. "Binji, you shouldn't have offended Nye Tian. Offending someone you can't afford to offend could very possibly bring a disaster to the royal family." Lan Yunhai suddenly remembered what Nye Tian had said before, "If you reject my conditions, the Blue Cloud Empire will welcome a disaster." Looking at it now, Nye Tian definitely had some awareness of the whole thing, otherwise it would be impossible for him to only give Qin Yetian half an hour's time. And Lan Yunhai faintly felt that Nye Tian indeed had the strength to bring a disaster to the Blue Cloud Empire. Thinking up to this point, Lan Yunhai couldn't help but shiver. Lan Yunhai could tell that Qin Yetian was babbling nonsense, and so could Nye Tian. Everyone present was not a fool. Qin Yetian's words could deceive a 3-year-old child, but to want to deceive this group of intelligent people, it was simply impossible. Nye Tianling looked at Qin Yetian coldly and did not say a word. Lan Yunhai's cold gaze swept over and he said, "Qin Yetian, I am very gratified that you can place righteousness before family. But you can't escape responsibility for this matter. Qin Yulong is your son. You can't escape the crime of not teaching your son properly. Furthermore, young lady Nyeyuro was kidnapped in the Martial City, and the Imperial Guard army under you did not notice anything at all. You can't escape the crime of negligence of duty. You can't absolve yourself from the blame for 2 crimes." Lan Yunhai was well aware that this matter was related to Lan Binji and naturally did not want to pursue it. He might as well casually punish Qin Yetian and let it go. This subject is willing to accept punishment, Qin Yetian said with his head lowered. His back was already drenched in cold sweat, but he was already much more at ease. Lan Yunhai's words were very obvious. He was already deliberately shielding Qin Yetian. Lan Yunhai saw that Nye Tian was silent, so he coughed dryly and said, "Mr. Nye, you are the victim in this matter. As for how to punish Qin Yetian, it will be up to you to decide." Lan Yunhai's words were completely out of consideration for Nye Tian's feelings. He pushed the boat along with the current, allowing Nye Tian to vent his anger on Qin Yetian. Nye Tianling looked coldly at Qin Yetian. His entire body was filled with undisguised killing intent. He opened his mouth and said word by word, "I want him dead." As the cold and gloomy voice fell, the faces of everyone present froze at the same time. No one would have thought that Nye Tian would actually make such a request. If not for Nye Tian's gloomy face, everyone would have thought that he was joking. Nye Tian naturally knew that this matter was Lan Bingji's doing, and Qin Yulong was only a little scapegoat. Since Lan Bingji didn't dare to come out and admit it, then Nye Tian was going to cripple Qin Yetian. Lan Yunhai froze for a few seconds and finally, he laughed awkwardly and said, "Mr. Nye, this punishment of yours is a bit..." Without waiting for Lan Yunhai to finish, Nye Tian forcefully interrupted him and said, "Your Majesty, if you feel that my punishment is too much, you don't have to carry it out." Lan Yunhai looked at Nye Tian, and a ball of stuffy fire was immediately suppressed in his chest. However, he still said kindly, "Mr. Nye, please change the method of punishment." Nye Tian raised his head and took a look at Lan Yunhai, then said, "I only have this method of punishment. If your Majesty doesn't wish to kill Qin Yetian, then forget about it." Chapter 116. Nye Tian wanted to kill Qin Yetian, and he wanted to use Qin Yetian to threaten Lan Yunhai. None of the people present were fools. Nye Tian naturally knew that Lan Yunhai was protecting Lan Bingji. Since you want to protect Lan Bingji, then be prepared to face my, Nye Tian's, fury. It didn't matter if Lan Yunhai killed Qin Yetian or not, Nye Tian would still treat Lan Bingxian. Lan Bingxian and Lan Bingji's matter were two separate matters, and Nye Tian had no choice but to put the two matters together. Now that the situation was clear, Nye Tian would deal with the two matters separately. "Your Majesty, Qin Yetian was so scared that his gallbladder ruptured. He was afraid that Lan Yunhai would accidentally agree to Nye Tian's request. If that really happened, he wouldn't be able to find a grave even if he cried." Lan Yunhai muttered to himself for a while and said, "Mr. Nye, although Qin Yetian is guilty, he doesn't deserve to die. I will give him punishment, but I won't kill him. Furthermore, I promise you that in the future, what happened today will never happen again in Blue Cloud City. If anyone dares to harm Miss Nyeyuro, no matter who it is, it will be on Qin Yetian's head. This is my decision, Mr. Nye, please accept it." Lan Yunhai had already made the biggest concession, and directly tied Nyeyuro and Qin Yetian together. If anything happened to Nyeyuro, Qin Yetian would have to bear the responsibility. This meant that Qin Yetian had to ensure Nyeyuro's safety in the future, or else the one who died would be him. Everyone looked at Nye Tian, waiting for his reply. Lan Yunhai had already given Nye Tian enough face. Even someone with Xiao Luyang's status had never made Lan Yunhai feel so embarrassed before. Nye Tian's face was calm and he said indifferently, "I have already said that I only have one way to punish him, and that is to kill him. If your Majesty is not willing, then so be it. As for how your Majesty will punish him, that is your business, and has nothing to do with me. I will not accept it. So be it, bring me to see the princess." Lan Yunhai had already made his decision, and Nye Tian wouldn't waste any more words with him. Since you want to protect your son, you should be prepared to pay the price. Lan Yunhai's expression was extremely unsightly. He'd never imagined that Nye Tian would be so stubborn. He'd already made such a huge concession, yet Nie Tian actually turned a blind eye to it and remained completely indifferent. At this time, everyone's expression was stiff. Xiao Luyang felt a little bitter in his heart. At this time, he suddenly had a strange feeling. Nie Tian's attitude towards him before was considered polite. "All right. Grandmaster Xiao, please take Mr. Nie to see the princess." Lan Yunhai sighed with a complicated expression. At this point, the conflict between the two sides could no longer be resolved. This was the only way. "Yes." Xiao Luyang hurriedly bowed and said to Nie Tian, "Mr. Nie, please follow me." Xiao Luyang clearly saw through Nie Tian's attitude towards Lan Yunhai. At this time, he no longer dared to pretend to be arrogant in front of Nie Tian. "Yifeng, come over as well." Nie Tian held Nie Yuro's hand and said indifferently to Zhang Yifeng. "Yes, sir," Zhang Yifeng said respectfully as he followed Nie Tian. In the great hall, only a few people were left looking at each other in dismay and shock. After today's events, Qi Feng, Jin Mingxin, Lan Bingqian, and the others' view of Nie Tian had once again undergone a qualitative change. Nie Tian's position in their hearts had risen greatly. Lan Yunhai's face was gloomy. In his heart, he was still wondering if protecting Qin Yetian was the right choice. A moment later, under Xiao Luyang's lead, Nie Tian and the others arrived at the princess palace. Just as Nie Tian walked out of the palace, he smelled a pungent smell from afar. It carried traces of blood and hostility. The myriad poison body is indeed powerful. Nie Tian's brows slightly furrowed as he formed a seal with his hands. Soon after, a mysterious Yuan power formation appeared on his palm. Nie Tian placed the array on Nie Yuro's body to protect her. With Nie Yuro's current strength, if she came within 10 meters of the myriad poison body, she would definitely be poisoned. Xiao Luyang looked at the array that Nie Tian had casually created. The shock in his heart was written all over his face. He never imagined that Nie Tian not only had amazing attainments in the alchemy Dao, but also cultivated the spirit array Dao. A spirit array master was in existence with a higher status than an alchemist. The princess palace was decorated very luxuriously. There were precious decorations everywhere. There were even many rare medicinal herbs that were greatly beneficial to a cultivator's cultivation. Nie Tian looked at the 3-soul incense, emperor-grade heavenly knotweed, ice mountain snow lotus, octagonal coral, and a series of supplementary medicinal herbs in the room. His face immediately darkened. He said, "Yifeng, put away all these things." These things were extremely important cultivation supplementary materials for ordinary cultivators. They could subtly increase a cultivator's cultivation speed. But for the myriad poison body, these things were nearly fatal. It was hard to imagine that Lan Bingxian lived in such an environment every day. It was a miracle that she could persist until now. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He handed his interspatial ring to Zhang Yifeng and let him put away all the medicinal herbs. The interspatial ring was something Nie Tian had plundered from Ju Wan. The medicinal herbs in front of him were all Tier 3 and Tier 4 medicinal herbs. They were very precious. Of course, they couldn't be wasted. Xiao Luyang frowned slightly. He didn't dare to stop them. The current Nie Tian was like a mountain in his eyes. He couldn't be questioned at will. "Uncle Xiao, is that you?" At this time, a soft voice sounded from inside the room. "Your Highness." Xiao Luyang heard the voice and hurriedly walked over. Nie Tian also walked in. He saw a gorgeous bed covered with various medicinal herbs. On it lay an 18 or 19-year-old girl. The girl's face was pale. She looked very weak, but there was a faint smile on her face. It gave people a very peaceful and quiet feeling. This girl looked very similar to Lan Bingqian. She was Lan Bingqian's twin sister, Lan Bingxian. "Uncle Xiao, is someone here?" Lan Bingxian heard other people's voices. She endured the pain and tried to sit up. But this simple action consumed all of Lan Bingxuan's strength. Her beautiful face was dripping with sweat. "Big sister, what's wrong?" At this time, Nieyuro suddenly ran in. Her small hands supported Lan Bingxian. She wanted to help her sit up. Nieyuro was protected by the array that Nie Tian had set up. She wouldn't be harmed by the myriad poison body. "Little sister, don't come near me!" Lan Bingxian screamed and quickly distanced herself from Nieyuro. In the past, when palace maids approached Lan Bingxian, they would inexplicably be poisoned. Lan Bingxian was afraid that Nieyuro would also be poisoned. "It's okay." With a faint smile, Nie Tian walked over and said in a soft voice, "Let her help you." He could see that Lan Bingxian was a very kind girl. Chapter 117. Lan Bingxian looked at Nie Tian in surprise, feeling the overbearing confidence exuding from the latter. She didn't know how to refuse. Nieyuro carefully helped Lan Bingxian sit up and smiled. "Sister, he's my brother, he's here to treat you." "Treat me?" Lan Bingxian was surprised and immediately looked at Xiao Luyang. Xiao Luyang hurriedly bowed and said, "Your Highness, this is Mr. Nie Tian. He's Master Zhang Yifeng's teacher, specially invited by His Majesty to treat your Highness." "Zhang Yifeng's teacher?" Lan Bingxuan's small face became even more surprised. Suddenly she laughed crisply. "How old are you? Are you really Zhang Yifeng's teacher?" Lan Bingxian saw that Nie Tian was a few years younger than her, and Zhang Yifeng was a third-rank alchemist. If Nie Tian was Zhang Yifeng's teacher, was he a fourth-rank alchemist? Lan Bingxian stayed in her bedroom every day and knew very few people. Besides Xiao Luyang, Zhang Yifeng was the other person who often came to see her. But she didn't know that Zhang Yifeng was actually a little beggar she had given alms to when she was young. Every time Zhang Yifeng came to see Lan Bingxian, he would come with Xiao Luyang. In the world of alchemy, the wise are respected. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "I can become Yifeng's teacher. Naturally, I have my own strength. It has nothing to do with my age." "Teacher," Nie Tian said. Zhang Yifeng had already walked in and respectfully returned the spatial ring to Nie Tian. Lan Bingxian was even more surprised. Looking at the somewhat funny master and disciple pair in front of her, she couldn't help but giggle. The laughter was very sweet, very beautiful, like a silver bell, making people who heard it couldn't help but want to laugh together. Lan Bingxian had a pair of crystal-clear eyes, looking very pure, without a trace of filth. Living under the threat of death every day, Lan Bingxian could still maintain a pure heart. She was indeed a kind girl. Nie Tian looked around Lan Bingxian and couldn't help but frown and shake his head. Lan Bingxian was surrounded by all kinds of precious herbs, some of which were used to help martial artists cultivate, while others were used to resist the bloody aura on Lan Bingxuan's body. "Yifeng, carry the princess out of this room," Nie Tian said lightly. Lan Bingxian had the myriad poison body. Before her myriad poison body matured, this kind of environment was a huge torture for her. It was hard to imagine that in such an environment, Lan Bingxian could still maintain an optimistic attitude. This. Zhang Yifeng's face turned red, and a difficult expression appeared on his face. "No." Xiao Luyang immediately objected. "Her Royal Highness is priceless. How can she be hugged by another man at will?" Nie Tian slightly frowned. He looked at Xiao Luyang and said in a cold voice, "You have no idea what kind of pain the princess is living in every day. It's all because of quacks like you who used medicine in a panic that the princess became like this. I'm the one who's treating the princess now, so it's better for those unrelated to keep their mouths shut." Nie Tian, you. Xiao Luyang was so angry that his beard was sticking up, but he couldn't say a single word. What Nie Tian said was right. If Lan Bingxian didn't live in such an environment where herbs were everywhere, her myriad poison body would have already achieved some success, and she definitely wouldn't be in such a state now. Lan Bingxian, who was watching from the side, was extremely shocked, her small mouth opened wide. She naturally knew of Xiao Luyang's identity. Even her father didn't dare to speak to Xiao Luyang like this. Who exactly is Nie Tian, to actually dare to reprimand Xiao Luyang in front of his face? What was strange was that Xiao Luyang actually didn't dare to have an extreme reaction. "Mr. Nye, don't be angry, I can get up by myself," Lan Bingxian said softly, and tried her best to prop up her body, but her body only got up halfway, and her forehead was already dripping with sweat. She was too weak, like a broken leaf in the wind, a light blow would cause her to fall. Nye Tian, who was watching from the side, lightly shook his head, and then shot a glance at Zhang Yifeng. Only then did the latter react, mustered up 120% of his courage, and finally carried Lan Bingxian up. Nye Tian asked Zhang Yifeng to place Lan Bingxian in the hall, while he looted all of the herbs in the room. These herbs were fatal to Lan Bingxian, but to Nye Tian, they were good things. Of course he couldn't let them go to waste. Nye Tian walked out of the room, and said to Xiao Luyang cold, "Master Xiao, I'm going to treat the princess now, please leave." Xiao Luyang was startled for a moment, but in the end, he still turned around and left. Nye Tian didn't waste any more time, and took out several kinds of poisonous herbs from his space ring. Nye Tian opened his palm, and circulated the 9 heavenly fire art, and a ball of crimson-red flames appeared on his palm. Zhang Yifeng, who was watching from the side, was dumbstruck. He never thought that there would actually be such a miraculous fire control art in the world. Completely without the help of external forces, just relying on one's own yuan power to produce flames, it was really too unimaginable. Nye Tian's whole body was focused, and he carefully refined each kind of herb, and then put them into a medicine bottle. This process seemed simple, but it consumed a huge amount of mental energy. Moreover, what Nye Tian refined were extremely poisonous herbs, and he needed to use his heart to sense the changes in the attributes of the herbs. The slightest carelessness during the whole process could cause the herbs to explode, and that would be terrible. After a moment, Nye Tian refined all the herbs, put the medicinal liquid into a medicine bottle, and handed it to Zhang Yifeng. Nye Tian instructed, "These medicines are for Her Highness's medicinal bath, 1 drop at a time, 3 times a day. After 5 days, Her Highness's body will improve." "Thank you, Master." Zhang Yifeng was extremely excited, and hurriedly bowed to express his thanks. Nye Tian nodded and said, "Later, I will teach you the next treatment method, and from now on, Her Highness's illness will be taught to you. As for that Xiao outside, it's better to let him not get involved." "Yes." Zhang Yifeng bowed in response. Nye Tian faintly smiled, but in his heart, he felt that it was a pity. Lan Bingxian originally had the 10,000 poison body, and could be considered a good spiritual body of heaven and earth. Unfortunately, it had been delayed for too long, and her yuan meridians were severely damaged, so she could only slowly recuperate. In the future, Lan Bingxuan's martial Dao achievements would not be too high, but they would not be too low either. Next, Zhang Yifeng helped the princess with the medicinal bath. Because the palace maids could not approach Lan Bingxian, Zhang Yifeng could only do it himself. Zhang Yifeng immediately returned after making arrangements for Lan Bingxian. Nye Tian gave all the herbs he bought from the black market to Zhang Yifeng, and at the same time, gave him a list and said, "I have written down all the pill recipes for Her Highness's treatment. You only need to follow the pill recipes and proceed step by step. In a month's time, Her Highness's body will recover to the standard of a normal person." Next, Nye Tian told Zhang Yifeng about some of the taboos of the 10,000 poison body, and had the latter memorize them one by one. After doing all this, Nye Tian said something to Zhang Yifeng, and then left the palace with Nyeyuro. The palace gave Nye Tian an oppressive feeling, and he did not want to stay in this kind of place for even a moment longer. After leaving the palace, Nye Tian immediately returned to the Jin residence. After meeting with Jin Debao and the others, Nye Tian personally checked on Qiu Shan's injuries, and after confirming that the latter's life was not in danger, he felt relieved. After today's matter, Nye Tian realized the importance of strength. Chapter 118. Imperial Palace, a secret place. Mother, I know that Mother dotes on me the most. Please beg Martial Uncle to personally kill that little bastard Nyetian. Lan Binji knelt in front of a green-robed woman and begged with tears and snot flowing down his face. Lan Binji already knew that Nyetian was not dead and had once again escaped from Tang Yuyu's hands. Not only that, Nyetian had also forced Qin Yetian to hand over Nyeyuro. Qin Yetian even had to kill Qin Yulong and make him a scapegoat. Tang Yuyu had failed again. This was something that Lan Binji had never expected. Tang Yuyu was known as the #1 assassin of the Bloodbat sect. Those who had died in her hands were all experts who were much stronger than Nyetian. However, Tang Yuyu was able to complete the mission perfectly every time. But against Nyetian, who was only at the origin spirit realm, Tang Yuyu had failed twice. This was really incomprehensible. The green-robed woman was noble and beautiful. Her body was covered in a faint green glow. Her body moved slightly and a cold aura instantly filled the air. She was Lan Binji's mother, the Empress of the Blue Cloud Empire and Qin Yetian's sister, Qinya. Binji, get up. There's no need to put on such a pitiful show in front of Mother. Qinya smiled faintly. A hint of impatience appeared on her charming face. Her sharp eyes stared at Lan Binji as if she could see through the latter. She knew her own son very well. Qinya knew better than anyone what kind of person Lan Binji was. Originally, there was no deep hatred between Lan Binji and Nyetian. It was only because of Lan Binji's jealousy that things developed to this point. Of course, Qinya had long since heard about Nyetian. She was also very curious about what kind of young man Nyetian was. Not only was he able to defeat Lan Binji, but he was also able to convince an alchemist like Zhang Yifeng to become his disciple in name. She even knew about Lan Bingqian's visit to Nyetian. Actually, these things weren't enough for Qinya to pay attention to Nyetian. What really bothered her was that Nyetian could actually cure Lan Bingqian. Lan Bingqian had a very high position in Lan Yunhai's heart. If she recovered, it wouldn't be a good thing for Lan Binji. After all, Lan Bingqian was Lan Bingqian's twin sister. Qinya's expression gradually became gloomy as she carefully thought about this series of events. Mother, do you agree? Let Uncle Master make a move. He'll definitely be able to kill that little bastard. Lan Binji couldn't help but smile when she felt Qinya's cold killing intent. The martial uncle that Lan Binji mentioned was the Bloodbat sect master. Because Qinya was the junior sister of the Bloodbat sect leader, Lan Binji addressed her as martial uncle. Bingyi, I already know what happened to Nyetian. You should go back. Mother is a little tired. Qinya's gaze was strange as she looked towards a dark corner. Soon after, she stretched her body slightly, revealing a faint fatigue. Yes, this child will take his leave. Lan Binji stood up and bowed as he left. An undisguised cold smile hung on the corner of his mouth. Senior brother, I know you're here. Come out. After Lan Binji left, Qinya suddenly stood up in excitement. Her voice was slightly trembling, and her face was slightly red. Junior sister. Immediately after, a cold and deep voice sounded. It was as thin as gossamer, like a death knell from hell. In a dark corner, a burly figure in a black robe appeared. He seemed to have no legs as he floated over. Senior brother. Qinya was a little excited when she saw the man in the black robe. The man in the black robe's reaction was indifferent. He nodded slightly and stared at the darkness in front of him like a cold stone. The man in the black robe was none other than Qinya's senior brother, the Bloodbat sect leader Gao Jin. Senior brother Binji failed. The newcomer king of Tyrant Cloud Academy was snatched away by a youth called Nyetian, Qinya said. I already know about the matter. Gao Jin's gloomy voice sounded. Nyetian is indeed an unexpected factor. I'm really surprised that he could escape from Tang Yuyu's hands. Then what should we do next? Qinya asked. Originally, Qinya let Lan Binji participate in Tyrant Cloud Academy's freshman martial meet in order to raise Lan Binji's reputation and then let him compete for the position of Crown Prince. She really didn't expect that all her plans would be disrupted by Nie Tian. Now, not only did Lan Binji's reputation not increase, it was also not as good as before. Even Lan Yunhai had some complaints about Lan Binji. Gao Jin thought for a moment and said, Nie Tian is indeed a problem. We must get rid of him. However, Nie Tian is very close to the Alchemist Guild and Blue Cloud Chamber of Commerce. We can't act rashly now. Right now we just need to wait and see. There will always be a chance. Yes. I will listen to senior brother's arrangements. Qinya didn't dare to disobey Gao Jin's orders. Gao Jin smiled sinisterly. His indifferent face finally had some expression. He murmured, Nie Tian, I am really more and more curious about you. What secrets are you hiding behind your back? At the same time, Qin family. In the spacious hall, the important figures of the Qin family had already gathered. The atmosphere in the hall was oppressive and oppressive. In the middle of the hall there was a corpse lying on the ground. It was Qin Yulong. Qin Yulong and Qin Yuhu sat at the bottom. Their faces were gloomy and they lowered their heads in silence. Qin Yulong was dead. He died in the hands of Qin Yetian. However, this hatred was, of course, on Nie Tian's head. Nie Tian, you've gone too far. Finally, an angry voice broke the silence. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man in his 30s or 40s. He was Qin Yetian's second brother, Qin Hongtian. At the same time, Qin Hongtian was Qin Feng's father, and Qin Feng died in the hands of Nie Tian during the freshman martial meet. At this moment, Qin Hongtian's face was extremely gloomy. If Nie Tian was in front of him, he would definitely cut the latter into pieces and grind his bones into ashes. Nie Tian's identity is special. He has connections with various forces in Blue Cloud City. Moreover, he just cured the princess. Our Qin family can no longer afford to offend him. A powerless sigh was heard. The person who spoke was a green-clothed elder. He should be one of the older generation of the Qin family. Are we just going to let it go like this? Qin Hongtian's face was ashen. His son, Qin Feng, died in the hands of Nie Tian. He wanted revenge more than anyone else. Then what do you want? The green-clothed elder asked back. Qin Hongtian was speechless. He couldn't say anything. If he really had a way, he wouldn't need to vent his anger here. Enough. Stop arguing, Qin Yetian said in a deep voice. His face was gloomy. He said, this matter started because of Prince Binji. We still need to think of a way to deal with him. Our Qin family can't afford to offend Nie Tian. Lan Binji is a prince. He won't let Nie Tian off. Qin Yetian frowned. He suddenly remembered the time when he was in the freshman martial meet. If he had acted ruthlessly, he might have been able to kill Nie Tian. But now, he had no hope at all. Not to mention that he didn't dare to attack Nie Tian in Blue Cloud City. Even if he dared, he didn't have absolute confidence.